Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel below. We love to know what you want to hear next. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 331. Peeking. Qin Mu's gaze landed on the dew on his fingertip. It left him slightly at a loss. A sword skill could actually reach such a level? The sword skill that village chief executed this time was different from those in the past. The sword treading mountains and rivers showed back then taught him how to execute the whole process flawlessly, allowing him to learn how to execute the sword skill. Even though the sword treading mountains and rivers this time was the same one he'd been taught, there was something additional in it that made it different. It was like executing the creation of heaven and earth to create all things. Dao Sek's Dao sword used the method of algebra to analyze all things in nature, and then the 14 writings of Dao sword recreated all things in nature, which gave it unimaginable power. The sword skill of village chief, however, seemed to have taken an opposite path. He was creating all things in the world while his sword skill to interpret them. It was hard to say which method was superior, but from a conceptual point of view, there was an obvious choice. Dao sword worked under the expression of Dao follows the nature, while village chief's sword picture created nature, which showed that the conception of sword picture should be superior. Interpreting nature was a kind of learning, a learning from nature. Creation, on the other hand, was the act of making something out of nothing. Based on the summary of Dao Sek's teachings, the path produces 1, 1 produces 2, 2 produces 3, and 3 produce all things. Village chief's sword picture had mastered the path to produce all things. The Dao sword of Dao sect was interpreting all things, but exhausting all possibilities. Qin Mu focused his gaze on the drop of dew, which was sparkling and translucent, looking incomparably glossy. In the surface of the dew, he could actually see the reflection of boundless universes presenting themselves in fine detail. Cyan Heaven's eyes, awaken. Layers of formation markings swirled in Qin Mu's pupils, and with Cyan Heaven's eyes, he tried to see the fine sword lights which formed the dew. However, what disappointed him was that he couldn't see anything even with his skill. However, he noticed a marvelous point. The dew reflected external objects, and looking at it in detail, he could actually see even more details of the reflection. Through it, he looked at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor who had entered some marvelous realm. His gaze may look blank, but when looking into his eyes through the dew, Qin Mu could see countless changes in the arrays of his eyes. By looking even deeper, he seemed to see a world produced inside the transformations of the arrays. Qin Mu stirred up his spirit and maintained the operation of Cyan Heaven's eyes. Looking over, he could see everything even more clearly, and the transformations of the arrays in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes seemed to open a new world, demonstrating the magic of creation. He had the feeling of being there personally, situated in the world that was born in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes. He was experiencing the comprehension of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He was comprehending the sword path, and he was indeed a person brimming with talent. It was no wonder that Heavenly Devil Patriarch, Old Dao Master, and Old Rulai had sympathy for a talent such as him the moment they laid eyes on him and imparted the ultimate arts of their respective sacred grounds to him. Qin Mu was inferior to him in terms of comprehension and aptitude. When Imperial Preceptor first saw Village Chief's sword path, he was able to comprehend new things by analogy and grasp his own sword path. Faced with such a heaven-defying aptitude and talent, Qin Mu acknowledged that his own ability falling short. However, Qin Mu was currently using the dew's power to enter Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's state of comprehension, borrowing it to improve himself. Truly marvelousa. When Village Chief saw this, he sighed ruefully to Cripple. Even though Qin Mu's aptitude and comprehension aren't comparable to those of the saint that appears once every 500 years, but this kind of quick wit and diligence is not something the saint can match. Cripple was proud. As expected of the one I taught. It's as expected of the one we taught. Village Chief added as well. How do you view Imperial Preceptor? Can he be the human emperor? Cripple asked. Village Chief was silent for a moment, then said in a soft voice, "He's not inferior to me, and might be even more outstanding than me in the future." Cripple looked at him with doubt. I know you never finish your sentences, but why don't you say what you want to say all at once? Village chief sighed. I'm very strong and have reached the extreme of sword skills, but look at what severed my limbs. A sword. Cripple no longer said anything, so village chief continued. My limbs were severed by someone with a sword. Eternal peace imperial preceptor, this saint that appears once every 500 years, might be stronger than me, but if he doesn't have any chance meeting, he will be trapped on divine bridge realm like me. If he can't connect the divine bridge, there'll be no way to reach the other realm and he will just face the same end as me. Cripple's body trembled. He looked at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor before turning to Qin Mu. With a questioning look, he asked in a low voice, after you and I die, if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor also dies, what's going to happen to Qin Mu? I had originally wished for him to be an ordinary person, a normal person who will live a normal life. Yet he had exceeded my expectations time and again, destroying all my plans for him one after another. I can't be sure about his future. At first, I thought that he was an ordinary human, but ever since I went to search for Carefree Village, I became aware that he might have some extraordinary points. Cripple broke into a grin. Ordinary? Village chief, you're getting muddle-headed. Is there ever an ordinary overlord body? Muir is the overlord body, so how is he ordinary? Village chief's expression froze and he gave a forced laugh before continuing. That's right, I've forgotten that he's the overlord body, so it's natural for him to do stuff that is out of the ordinary. Yet he still exceeded my expectations this time. I thought he would comprehend some profound stuff from my sword path, yet he saw the process of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's comprehension in that drop of dew. This is too. He didn't know how to continue. Cripple laughed. Too inconceivable. Village chief nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It's indeed too inconceivable. Muir, this little fellow, I thought he would never awaken his spirit embryo, yet he did it. I thought he would be stuck on spirit embryo realm and never progress, yet he found the follow-up technique of overlord body. Overlord body 3 elixir technique. I thought he would be like everyone else, yet he defeated all 360 hall masters of Heavenly Devil cult and became their young cult master. I thought he wouldn't be able to learn what we teach him, yet he learned very well, with the momentum that surpasses us. He smiled bitterly. I thought I would never acknowledge him and never hand my legacy down to him, yet I acknowledged him and imparted my legacy to him. I even handed my burden and responsibility to him. He reminisced about the past with a feeling of wanting to laugh. At first, I didn't trust him and didn't think he could accomplish anything extraordinary, yet every time he raises my expectations higher and higher. In the end, I realize that is still the one I trust the most. In truth, as we raised him up, we also grew from that. Cripple asked with a smile, what you're trying to say is? Village chief's wrinkles gathered together on his forehead, and he revealed a sincere smile from the depths of his heart. What I mean is that, in comparison to Imperial Preceptor, I think more highly of Muir, who we all raised together. The child that was given to us by Surging River in the darkness 15 years ago was born extraordinary. His aptitude isn't as astonishing as that of Imperial Preceptor, and his comprehension isn't as heaven-defying. But there's something about him that I can't see through. It's overlord body, Cripple said excitedly. The smile on village chief's face froze, and he had a myriad of emotions as he muttered. Maybe it's because of overlord body. An ordinary person creating a miracle once might be by chance, twice might be by luck, but after 3 or 4 times it won't be chance or luck anymore. Instead, he is indeed different from others, an overlord body that's worth our respect. Our Muir has inherited the good points of us failures who have hidden in great ruins and learned from our lessons. He will definitely be able to walk farther than any of us. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehended the path, his understanding growing deeper and deeper. With the drop of dew to peek at him comprehending the path, Qin Mu managed to see the entire process as it happened. With Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehending the sword path, he would gain a lot of benefits due to the man being on a way higher realm than him. Even though Qin Mu was still at the primary stage of skill, by borrowing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor comprehending path, he could peek into the stage of sword path. The benefits he gained from that were unimaginable. Compared to a giant like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Qin Mu was only a small child. Yet this small child could stand on the shoulders of this giant to attain a wider horizon. Even though all the people in Qingmen Pass were comprehending village chief's sword treading mountains and rivers, those that were able to grasp the paramount marvel within it were few and far between. Most of them could comprehend a move or two, and it may be extraordinary enough for them to last the rest of their lives. But there was absolutely no one that had received as huge a benefit as Qin Mu. It was equivalent to learning about paramount marvels in regards to the sword from village chief and imperial preceptor, these two great sword gods. After a long time, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor woke up from comprehending the path, and there was an indescribable bearing about him. Upon reaching the highest peak, all mountains could be held within a single glance. Now that he had stepped onto the peak of sword skill, looking at all the sword skills and divine arts in the world gave him a sense of depression. There were no more sword skills and divine arts in this world that could light up his eyes. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor revealed a sorrowful expression, but soon after, he noticed something different. He could actually feel someone peeking at him, into his Tao heart, into him comprehending the path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was astonished and looked toward the source, his gaze landing on Qin Mu. He was stunned for a moment, then broke out laughing while shaking his head. I see, Heavenly Saint Cultmaster is really great at using others for his own gain. Qin Mu immediately felt his gaze. There was a light sting in his eyes, and he immediately redirected his gaze. When their gazes crossed paths, Qin Mu revealed a radiant smile. Heavenly King, sorry to disturb you. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor smiled in return. No worries. Suddenly, the mountains and rivers dispersed as all sword lights vanished. Village Chief pulled back his sword lights and said to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, "You have already attained the path." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor bowed to express his thanks. If not for Tao Brother's guidance, I still wouldn't know when I would be able to enter the realm of the path. The arms and legs of Village Chief that were formed by vital chi dispersed automatically as he said, "Come forward and take a look at the severed section of my arms and legs. I had always left these sword scars alone, never erasing them. In the future, you might meet the god that left me these wounds." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked forward solemnly, squatting down to examine the wounds in detail. What he saw were sword scars which had been left behind on old human emperor by a sword that was stronger than his. A practitioner proficient in sword had been injured by the sword. In Imperial Preceptor's eyes, Village Chief's sword skills had already reached the realm of the path, which meant they were above his. It's just that his chi and blood were exhausted and not flourishing like his. Yet from these injuries he could see sword skills and a sword path that was even stronger. "Do you have confidence in defeating him?" Village Chief asked. "Not now. However, I might in the future. You imparted your sword path to me, and you are also the enlightenment of my sword skills, so you are my teacher. Thus, would you hand the burden that you're carrying to me?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor asked with a grim face. Village Chief shook his head and smiled. "There's no need to hand it to you. I have already given it to someone else." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart trembled violently, but then he came to a sudden realization. He looked at Qin Mu and asked in a low voice, "The new human emperor?" Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 332. Divine Canon. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had a somewhat complicated gaze, and a murderous thought even arose in his heart. As the human emperor of the previous generation, Village Chief didn't care about fame and fortune, nor did he desire power. His goal was much further away. He didn't set his gaze on the power of the mortal world. Thus he was respected by everyone. However, will Qin Mu, this new human emperor, be like Village Chief? Human emperors held massive power, and it surpassed even that of Emperor Yanfeng. Their charisma was even higher than that of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor as well. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had gone to Little Jade Capital before and knew some secrets, like the power of the human emperor. He and Emperor Yanfeng wanted to unite all the sects and sacred grounds in the world, but there were not many that would submit to them. However, it was possible for the human emperor. He could make the sects submit to him. The power of the human emperor wasn't won through a fight, but was instead given to him by all of the big sects and sacred grounds. Even if it was little Jade capital, if they knew Qin Mu was the new human emperor, they would probably support him as well. If Qin Mu got drunk on power, he could snatch the throne of eternal peace, completely destroying the great cause of eternal peace Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Yanfeng. If you and Emperor Yanfeng fail, the human emperor will still be around, giving the hope of a hope for a comeback, village chief said. Eternal peace Imperial Preceptor's heart shook, and he pulled back his gaze. I won't fail, village chief smiled. I hope you won't fail. I don't want Mu'er to suffer. Qin Mu walked over so the two of them closed their mouth and stopped talking. Eternal peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze landed on the youth again, and there was a weird feeling in his heart. This 15 or 16 years old boy in front of him could be said to hold the greatest authority in the world, yet he knew nothing about it. Qin Mu was the current Heavenly Devil Cult Master, Imperial Academician of Imperial College, the successor of Disabled Elderly Village, but his greatest identity to date was the current human emperor. His authority was even higher than that of the emperor and Imperial Preceptor, but Qin Mu didn't seem to know what it meant, which was really strange. Cripple caught Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's expression and was secretly pleased. Imperial Preceptor probably doesn't know that Mu'er has the treasure that symbolizes the imperial power of Ling family. If he knew Emperor's disc was with Qin Mu, he would probably jump up and down in fury. Cripple had handed Emperor's disc to Qin Mu for fun. He had studied that jade disc for dozens of years, but he could never comprehend the marvel of it, so it was useless for him to keep it. However, he did know what Emperor's disc symbolized. This jade disc was granted to Ling family by a god which represented a god giving imperial power to them. It was said 9 dragons monarch technique of Ling family was comprehended from Emperor's disc. When it was stolen, it was quite a huge incident, but it was suppressed by Emperor Yanfeng so no outsiders knew. No one would thus expect that this Emperor's disc would actually be in Qin Mu's hands. With Emperor's disc and human Emperor's seal, Qin Mu was the person with the most authority in this world, yet he knew nothing about it. If this foolish boy learned of this, he would definitely be shocked to the point he couldn't close his mouth. This thought pleased Cripple. Assistant Minister of Ministry of Works Shan Yoshin walked over and greeted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor before saying to Qin Mu in a low voice, Cult Master, the cannons in the flying ship need to be repaired after the huge battle. Can I invite Cult Master to go over and have a look? Your forging skills aren't any inferior to mine, so why do you need me to go over? Qin Mu asked in bewilderment. There are problems with the formation markings in the cannon barrel. After the cannon is activated for 8-9 times, the barrel becomes red hot, and the formation marking in the cannon gets disturbed, causing the power of the formation to decrease drastically and even blow up. Shan Yoshin was Heavenly Works Hall Master, so he quickly led the way in front while saying, while fighting with Barbarian D Empire this time, over a dozen cannons have already exploded and over 100 divine arts practitioners died from that. The formation markings of these cannons were designed by Hall of Heavenly Works and Hall of Array Elements together. I think it might be caused by the weariness of the black gold. It might not be able to handle the strain. Qin Mu shook his head. I don't think it's the weariness of black gold. It should be problems with the formation that caused thermal decay. Let me go and take a look. Thermal decay? Shan Yoshin's eyes lit up, and he praised. It's possible, but the design from Hall of Array Elements is perfect. I'm afraid it would be hard to improve it. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his eyebrows when he saw the two walking away. Cult Master actually knows the path of forging treasures so well that even Assistant Minister Shan needs to consult him, he said in astonishment. Cripple smiled. Mu'er learned to forge before. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took a glance at him and remembered how the shameless old thief had shat on his bed and peed in his teapot, causing his face to become slightly green. Furthermore, the picture of Sword God's back had also been stolen by him. Qin Mu and Shan Yoshin came onto a flying ship and saw numerous officials from Ministry of Works hurrying to repair the damaged parts on the ship. There were a few cannons that had exploded, and there were still some bloodstains on the barrels of the cannons. These kind of cannons were called true origin cannons. There was none on the merchant ship, and Fan Yunxiao really wanted to get a few, but they couldn't be bought on the market. Qin Mu first checked where the explosion had originated, then examined what energy had caused it. After that, he checked the section of the metal before taking a look at the batteries. He mumbled to himself, besides the problems in forging, the formations are wrong as well. However, they are hard to change. With the war at hand, we won't have time to reforge the batteries and redo the formations. In that case, we can only make changes to the cannon. In my opinion, we should add ring-shaped treasures at the cannon's opening and the depths of its bore, using them to concentrate the light. He sliced down a huge chunk of metal from the cannon's body and melted this piece of black gold with his vital qi, forging it on the spot. Numerous officials from Ministry of Works came over and looked as he forged the treasure. They were all full of praises as they took out paper and brush to record his forging methods. Not long later, Qin Mu forged 2 rings and made formation markings on them. The formations he had marked on the rings were the heaven markings from 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening technique that Blind had taught him. These 2 rings looked like the irises of an eye, just without a pupil. One of the rings was placed in the depths of the cannon's bore, and the other at its opening. Qin Mu transformed vermilion bird vital qi into blazing fire and connected the formation markings of True Origin Cannon with the formations on the 2 rings while saying, "Hall Master Shan, try activating True Origin Cannon." The energy for True Origin Cannon was supplied from the pill furnaces of the flying ship. After improving the pill furnaces on the flying ship, True Origin cannons could release their strongest power. Shan Yoshin immediately gave orders for the soldiers to start the furnace and rise into the air. The flying ship floated in midair and shot down toward Duck Tongue Zone. A beam of light that was brighter than before shot out in a straight line and hit a soldier of Barbarian D Empire that was cleaning up the battlefield. That soldier had been relying on his fast speed to clean the treasures off the corpses on the battlefield. Yet he didn't expect a beam of light to shoot over. He was pierced by the light, and his corpse fell to the ground. The officials on the flying ship were all stunned. They looked each other in the eyes, seeing their own astonishment there. The beam of True Origin Cannon could only reach 30 miles originally, but now it could actually cover 100 miles and more. Shan Yoshin personally adjusted the battery again and fired once more. Another beam of light shot out, and another Barbarian D Empire soldier collapsed onto the ground, dying an unnatural death. The other soldiers of Barbarian D Empire immediately scrambled for their lives as Shan Yoshin fired repeatedly, killing the soldiers of Barbarian D Empire one after another. None of them escaped alive, leaving only their mounts to sprint back alone to the mountain pass on the opposite side. Shan Yoshin touched the cannon's barrel and said in astonishment, "After firing 17 times, the barrel is still cool. Imperial Preceptor, Imperial Preceptor. Quick, invite Imperial Preceptor over." After a moment, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came to the ship with a look of inquiry. It was hard for Shan Yoshin to cover up his excitement as he bowed. "Imperial Preceptor, we can now capture Barbarian D Empire." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart trembled violently, and he said with a grim face, "Assistant Minister Shan, there's no joking around in the military." Shan Yoshin smiled. "Imperial Preceptor, this is definitely no joking matter. The True Origin cannons on our flying ship could only shoot 30 miles, and on the battlefield where there are many experts, strong practitioners on 7 Stars Realm can execute their sword pellets to take the lives of people 30 miles away. This is why the True Origin cannons on the flying ship could only be situated in the middle guard, and they could only fire 8 to 9 times. Now a True Origin cannon can shoot 160 miles. It had increased by 5 times. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor jumped in shock and cried out, 160 miles? Are you sure it's 160 miles? Shan Yoshin nodded heavily and said, "It's 160 miles. Furthermore, after Cult Master Qin's improvement, the barrel won't become hot. And this is the most crucial point, we can fire as many times as we want." The flying ships were originally in the middle guard, but now they can totally line up and be used to pave the way. Our army has over 200 flying ships, and there are 2 rows of True Origin cannons on both sides of the ships. Each row has 8 cannons, and there are also 4 cannons in the front and back of the ships, coming to a total of 40 cannons. With over 200 flying ships, 8 to 9,000 cannons, we can kill enemies from over 100 miles away, purging them wave after wave. We can directly push to the area outside of the city. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sucked in a cold breath and muttered, "Hall Master Shan, this cannon of yours will save a lot of our rations as well as countless soldier lives." Shan Yoshin bowed. "This is all Cult Master's work. I don't dare to take his credit." Qin Mu was currently drawing the formation blueprints of Heaven's Eyes. When he finished, he handed them over to an official from Ministry of Works. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went forward and took a look before asking with suspicion, "This is some kind of pupil divine art. You used a pupil divine art on the true origin cannon." Qin Mu washed his brush and nodded. "The opening of the cannon is the pupil, and the cannon's light is the gaze. This can really work." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was first stunned, then said, "There are over 100 pupil skills in Imperial College's floor of heavenly records, and among them, the strongest one is called Sunshot, which even I might not be able to cultivate. I have recorded the formation markings of Sunshot Divine Eyes. But could you create such a huge cannon?" His vital qi burst forth and layers of formation markings appeared, transforming into an incomparably complicated pupil. Qin Mu examined it in detail, and his body suddenly shrank. He walked among the formation markings. Then his body returned to normal and he landed on the ground. He said, "This cannon requires many people to create and needs 2 to 3 manufacturing factories to work together. I reckon only one can be made within 2 months' time. Furthermore, this kind of cannon would be extremely huge, much heavier than any other spirit weapon. Where did Imperial Preceptor get such a complicated divine eye?" "Great ruins," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said in a deep voice. "I was also shaken when I first saw this kind of pupil skill, but can you see what it is used for?" Qin Mu shook his head. "Slaughtering gods," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said calmly. "If you can create it, you will be the #1 in heavenly works in the world. The cannon you will make might be able to kill gods." Qin Mu immediately waved his hand and said extremely sincerely, "I don't dare to call myself #1 in heavenly works. I'm just #2. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 333. Divine Eyes Reappear. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. Sacred Cult Master sure isn't humble. Qin Mu was slightly bewildered. He was clearly humble, but he was realistic as well, admitting he was #2 and not #1. He never bragged, so how could this not be humble? Assistant Minister Shan Yoshin is the Heavenly Works Hall Master of Heavenly Devil Cult, and his treasure-forging methods were top-notch in the world. Even if other sects had capable people who were proficient in forging treasures, they couldn't match Shan Yoshin. Yet Shan Yoshin was inferior to Qin Mu, so since Qin Mu felt that he was still inferior to Mute, admitting himself to be #2 was being humble and telling the truth. Old Ma had taught him not to be arrogant or hot-tempered, not be servile or overbearing, so he was just following these requirements. It's just that to others, being the world's second best in heavenly works at such a young age was simply too shocking. Besides, when such a youth admitted that he was the #2 divine physician as well, it was simply too shocking. Qin Mu pondered the situation for a moment, then wrote down a list of materials before handing it over to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. These were the rough estimations for materials needed to create such a battery. If it wasn't enough, he could always ask for more. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor picked the list and took a moment to look through it before asking, "Sacred Cult Master wants to empty the Empire's treasury? Why does Imperial Preceptor say so?" he asked in bewilderment. "The black gold and black copper on your list are fine. Even if you use up more than several mines worth, they can still be provided. However, where do you want me to find divine gold and other divine materials?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor flicked the list away, revealed a very sincere look. "Is Cult Master coveting the treasures in the Empire's treasury? If that's the case, there's a place for Cult Master at the entrance of the marketplace. Imperial Preceptor, what you want to make is a thing to slaughter gods, something that's greater than a cult legacy treasure that can kill a few cult masters. Also, if you hadn't said it, I would have forgotten. Salaries will have to be paid since the cult followers of our heavenly saint cult will be helping out with the forging of the treasure. Qin Mu pondered over it, then wrote down the salaries as well as how many manufacturing factories he would need. Some of the names of the first-ranking high officials in the imperial court were also listed by him. To forge such a divine cannon, I will also require all the divine arts practitioners that are great in algebra. It'd be best to invite the experts of Dao sect. Qin Mu wrote down Dao sect on the list and said, every component of this divine cannon requires extreme precision, so there will be a lot of calculations to be done. With just the scholars of Imperial College, I'm afraid it will take us several hundred years to finish calculating everything, and there may even be errors. The experts of Dao sect are strong in this field, so we definitely need them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's face changed slightly as he felt the list in his hands becoming heavier. Even with the power of the entire empire, he reckoned they would only be able to forge one sunshot divine cannon. The hardest part in all of this was going to be inviting the experts of Dao sect. Old Dao Master had once attempted to assassinate Emperor Yanfeng and almost succeeded. They even assisted the previous crown prince in the rebellion and almost crowned him the new emperor. After the rebellion was quelled, Emperor Yanfeng and Crown Prince Ling Yushu had ruthlessly beaten down on Dao sect, so the two sides weren't on friendly terms. They were like fire and water. To ask the experts of Dao sect to help was going to be very difficult. However, this kind of divine cannon had to be forged. Otherwise, when the next disaster struck, there would be no way for them to defend against it. With Imperial Preceptor yet to recover to his peak state, who knew if the next disaster would arrive before that could happen? The Empire's treasury is empty, we don't have that much money. Could Sacred Cult Master give a discount? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor probed. Qin Mu calculated it and said, after Roland's Golden Palace is conquered, Imperial Preceptor shall allow me to choose 100 treasures. Then I'll pay the salaries of the cult followers myself. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor still wanted to bargain when Qin Mu smiled. Heavenly King, I didn't ask for my own salary. It's not a small price to invite the number 2 in heavenly works in the world to undertake this. What's more, I'm still the Heavenly Saint Cult Master. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed. I shouldn't have agreed to be the Heavenly King of Heavenly Saint Cult. Now my hands are tied and I can't even bargain. I need to report this to the Emperor and ask him to make a decision. Over the years, Eternal Peace Empire has annexed many countries and eradicated numerous sects, so there are some divine gold and divine materials in the Empire's treasury. We just need the Emperor to nod his head. Wait for a dozen days, and the Emperor's decree will come. Qin Mu turned around to help forge Heaven's rings. He wasn't too worried about the divine gold or divine materials since he didn't find them valuable as he had many of them when he was refining his sword pellet. They had come from the treasury of Heavenly Devil Cult, while he had transferred all kinds of cult legacy treasures there in return. He, Ministry of Works, and the scholars of Imperial College forged Heaven's rings together, their speed extremely fast. Speed was a crucial asset in war, and even if they only forged Heaven's rings, they still needed over 17,000 of them, which turned it into a huge project. Once the Heaven's rings were connected to the formation markings, they could concentrate the true origin light in the center of the barrel, not allowing it to come into contact with the walls. This gathered true origin light would become as thick as a bowl's opening, so the barrel wouldn't heat up, eliminating the weariness of the black gold and thermal decay. The cannon beam of true origin cannon was originally as thick as a water barrel, but now it had become as thick as a bowl's opening. The attack surface might have become smaller, but the range was drastically increased. The shooters could also fire them as long as they liked, without worrying that the cannon would explode. This turned the flying ships into battleships. Actually, Heaven's Eyes wasn't the greatest improvement that could be done to true origin cannon. Among 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening skill, Heaven's Eyes was the most basic pupil skill. The other 8 kinds of pupil skills were much stronger. The strongest was the 9th heaven, Fire Heaven's Eyes. However, the formation of Heaven's Eyes was the simplest and the easiest to learn. It was easiest to make and required the least amount of materials, so Qin Mu chose this skill to impart to everyone. If it was Fire Heaven's Eyes, Even Qin Mu would need 10 to 15 days to refine one ring. The formation markings of Fire Heaven's ring were too complicated, and if he used them, the true origin light might be concentrated into a beam of light that was even finer than a needle, and the range would once again be drastically increased. However, activating such a true origin cannon would require an extremely large amount of energy, one that even the Empire's treasury might not be able to handle. If Fire Heaven's rings could be forged to concentrate light into a thread, there would be no stronghold it couldn't overcome. Even an army with 10,000 men and horses wouldn't be able to break through if it was used to guard a sacred ground. Qin Mu calculated how much would such a guarding formation cost and was instantly disappointed. Heavenly Saint Cult would be able to forge it, but they wouldn't be able to use it. Activating the formation and maintaining it required too many medicinal stones. His thoughts started wandering again. Even though Fire Heaven's eyes wasn't as crazily strong as Sunshot Divine Eyes, Blind's 9 Heavens Eyes awakening skill and his divine eyes contained the formation markings of 9 layers of heavens, which was equivalent to the power of 9 layers of heaven accumulating together. Now that was terrifying. When Grandpa Blind's eyes were still around, wouldn't everyone have just died from one look? Qin Mu couldn't help becoming fascinated. Blind was short and was always chattering away while propping himself up by his bamboo cane to show off his literary excellence. It was hard to imagine how terrifying his gaze would have been when his eyes were still around. Then again, what kind of person could have dug out Blind's divine eyes? Since the spear god back then had such terrifying divine eyes, who was the one that was able to take his eyes and reduce such a godly existence to that kind of state? Dao sect? Great Thunderclap Monastery? Li Tianqing? Or is it Little Jade Capital? Qin Mu wondered about it when he suddenly remembered the youth called Su Shanghua, which stirred his heart. Could it be that place called High Heavens from which Su Shanghua came? Blind was known as Spear God, but his strength lay in his divine eyes. But they were dug out. Butcher was known as Heaven Knife and had once slaughtered his way up to the sky. Legend said that a god had appeared and severed him from the waist. Village Chief was known as Sword God, but his limbs had been severed by a sword. Were any of these related? Cripple was the thief god, and his leg had been chopped off by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor when he went to steal from the Imperial Palace, so it was different from Blind, Butcher, and the rest. Mute's tongue was cut off, but without Mute saying anything, no one knew the story behind it. Apothecary's face was sliced off by himself, parting over the dispute of love. Deaf's ears had been cut off by himself as he hated himself for not using them to pay attention to outside matters. Granny C's heart devil was Li Tianqing. They were master and disciple fighting over a divine beauty. Old Ma's arm had been severed by himself as a compensation for his master's kindness. All these were not related. Only Butcher and Village Chief's disability had similar reasons. A god. Meanwhile, the person who dug out Blind's eyes was unknown. Where could Grandpa Blind's eyes be? Qin Mu fell into a daze, but then shook his head to throw this matter to the back of his mind. He thought to himself, according to the theory of true origin canon, I can make use of 9 Heavens Eyes awakening technique to create a pupil divine art. Grandpa Blind only taught me pupil skills, without teaching me divine arts, but I can create one myself. When I succeed in cultivating my divine eyes, I would like to see who will come to dig out my eyes. He immediately put what he thought into action and executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Mobilizing the 7 writings of creation in great educational heavenly devil scriptures, he utilized Human King creation technique and Earth Aeon creation technique. Instantly, fire energy from his vital chi started to gather in his eyes. Layers of formations gathered in his pupils, and Cyan Heaven's eyes appeared. When he executed the technique, 2 beams instantly shot out. Qin Mu's eyes blazed with fire, and the light became more and more intense. His gaze focused on the cannon battery in front of him, slicing it into 3 parts. Everyone on the ship looked over, and Qin Mu immediately retracted his gaze, dispersing the formation in his eyes. With a smile, he said, "Don't panic. I just felt that this battery was useless, so I decided to reforge it." The astonishment on everyone's face didn't fade away, while Qin Mu's heart pounded violently as his hands formed into tight fists. Divine eyes are truly powerful. Whoever I look at will die. Cripple and village chief sat at the gate of the city lord's manor, basking in the sun. When they saw the two beams, Cripple couldn't help shaking his head. Mu'er, this rascal, playing around again. He's totally not afraid of spoiling his eyes with the heat. Blind is also too big-hearted to even teach him such a dangerous thing. Village chief beamed at him while saying, "You can see how strong Blind's divine eyes were by looking at Qin Mu. The person who dug his eyes out is no ordinary person. With someone able to do this around, you should be careful as well. Maybe someone will take a liking to your legs." Cripple trembled, then looked over while asking in a low voice, "What you mean is that someone is trying to gather all the things that had reached the realm of God? What does he want all of them for? To piece together a god?" Village chief sighed and said, "There are more people from my generation than just me. You may meet someone like this." Cripple shrunk his head back. "I'm timid, so don't scare me. Can't I just run away?" Village chief looked at Qin Mu, who was on the ship, and said in a low voice, "I wish I could cut down the obstacles for Mu'er to grow peacefully. However, I don't know if I'll live that long. Mu'er is still too innocent. If only he could be a little more crafty." In Roland Golden Palace, strong corporeal bodies sat in the shrines around Pangong Tso, each of them executing shaman spell divine arts to continuously bombard an ancient book in the middle. They were trying to undo its seal. This book was, of course, one of those that he had scavenged from Qin Hanjin's treasure ship. Boom! A huge explosion rang out, and the seal on the book was finally broken. Pangong Tso couldn't hide the excitement in his heart, and hurried over to flip open the ancient book. But his face turned black the moment he read the first few lines, and he threw the ancient book to the ground. Great educational, heavenly devil scriptures again. Is this god from Carefree Village part of Heavenly Devil cult? Beside him, books were strewn all over the floor. There was only one that hadn't yet been opened. Pangong Tso composed himself and used up all his energy to mobilize his previous bodies to open up the final scripture. When he flipped open the first page, golden light burst forth and lighted up the entire sacred hall. Pangong Tso became wild with joy. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 334. The Sacred Hands That Court Disaster. What technique is this? That book was a golden one that was extremely difficult to destroy. There weren't many words on it, and the bits and pieces of them were all very short. For example, there were words like Magpie Bridge, Mysterious Guide, God Crossing, whose meanings were unknown. Pangong Tso's gaze landed on the first page, and on the picture, there was splendid celestial heaven, which was a dazzling sight. What had lighted up the entire hall with golden light were the rays that came from that picture. Even though it was a painting, it was way too realistic. It seemed like the celestial heavens in the book was real. In front of it was a broken bridge, and whose end stood a godlike figure. Pangong Tso was slightly stunned. This sight looked a little familiar. He then looked at the surroundings in the picture and noticed a sun and moon as well as the 5 elements. This is divine bridge, divine treasure. That figure of a god should be the primordial spirit. What's this picture doing in the golden book? Isn't the divine bridge of Carefree Village complete? Then why is it broken in this picture? The others' pages had different pictures which portrayed different circulation paths. The circulation method of vital qi in the spirit embryo, how to control the 5 qi of 5 elements divine treasure, how to determine 6 directions to stabilize the heaven and earth, how to link the 7 stars, how to combine the soul and vital qi as one to strengthen the primordial spirit, how to open up life and death to see Yudu. When it came to the 8 diagram, it was divine bridge, divine treasure again. Pangong Tso's heart suddenly pounded violently a few times. He saw the first 7 pictures as a bed cover that was spread out for the vital qi in the 8th picture, so there would be a fantastic transformation at the time. Most of the vital qi seemed to have been drawn over by an indescribable force. It looked like magpies were laying out the way forward from the broken bridge. Magpie Bridge. Pangong Tso's heart throbbed. This was the cultivation method of Magpie Bridge which could reconnect the broken bridge. He hurriedly flipped open the next page and saw that the primordial spirit there had come to the end of Magpie Bridge. However, there was still an impassable distance to the celestial heavens in front of it. At this moment, The circulation path of vital qi had a miraculous transformation and gained an indescribable feeling of intersecting with the celestial heavens. It was drawn in its direction, and a bridge was slowly growing out from there. Secrets of Mysterious Guide. Pan Gong Tso's eyes sparkled from excitement, but he immediately stabilized his heart. He then turned the next page while suppressing his urge to cheer. The methods recorded in the Golden Book were simply too complicated. If it was him, he wouldn't be able to come up with even the first step for such a complicated and intricate technique to reconnect the divine bridge. Yet the people of Carefree Village could actually create it, which was simply unimaginable. This is a golden book that surpasses the knowledge I accumulated throughout all of my lives. So what if the Qin brat stole a portion of my previous wealth? With this golden book, I will be able to break through divine bridge realm to become a god. Pan Gong Tso rose, feeling giddy. He knew he was too excited, which resulted in his Tao heart getting bombarded. Even though he was an old monster which had lived for over 10,000 years, blood still rushed to his head from happiness, making it hard for his Tao heart to calm down. As long as I cultivate to divine bridge realm and awaken divine bridge divine treasure, I'll be able to become a god. I have to quickly raise my cultivation. At that moment, Grand Shaman of Roland's Golden Palace came to report. Grandmaster, the front lines are being hard-pressed. Khan Rwandi sent word that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor has reached the front lines, and he has also called over the Heavenly Devil Cult Master. He showed off his sword skill divine art, which resulted in the sword lights that were like sea, controlling the entire battlefield of several hundred miles in radius. Astonished, Pan Gong Tso broke into a laughing fit. Is Rwandi crazy? Heavenly Devil Cult Master is the Qin brat, so where would he get such a great ability? Controlling several hundred miles with sword lights? Even in my previous lifetimes, I didn't have that kind of skill. I doubt that even Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would be able to do that, and he's even injured now. Nonsense. Pure nonsense. Khan Rwandi's intention is to invite Grandmaster to mobilize the experts of the Golden Palace to assist, Grand Shaman said. Pan Gong Tso's was in quite a good mood, so he smiled. Rwandi, that brat, is a little too timid. I have already sent orders to the entire prairie. There were 100 tribes on the prairie and 100 khans to support him. The abilities and cultivations of these khans are all not weak. In addition, Wolf Store Country is attacking Winter Iron Pass in the north to disperse the army of Eternal Peace. Yet he actually still wants to borrow the power of our Roland's Golden Palace. Grand Shaman immediately said, Grandmaster, how do we reply to Khan Rwandi? The sea of sword light didn't seem to be fake. Pan Gong Tso rose and walked to and fro while mumbling, Sea of sword light, sea of sword light. I've seen this kind of sword skill before. Looks like that one has arrived. Old Human Emperor can't even sit still before he dies. Grand Shaman shuddered. Old Human Emperor? Since Old Human Emperor made an appearance, things will be much easier. Pan Gong Tso smiled. This is a chance for our Roland's Golden Palace to show our face. Go to the Divine Mountain in West Earth and invite the people of high heavens with incenses. Tell them that their Old Human Emperor has walked out of great ruins. In the meantime, I shall bring the experts of Roland's Golden Palace to assist them at the border station. Grand Shaman's expression changed drastically as he cried out, Think thrice, Grandmaster. Old Human Emperor has arrived and his sword skills have reached perfection. I'm afraid our Roland's Golden Palace. Our Roland's Golden Palace is a sacred ground, so how can we be scared of this old fart? Now that Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Yanfeng are both useless, Tao Master and Rulai are old, Tao Sect and Great Thunderclap Monastery don't have anyone in charge anymore. That Qin brat who is the cult master of Heavenly Devil Cult is still small and serves no purpose, so eternal peace deserves to be eradicated, Pan Gong Tso said leisurely. Grand Shaman was slightly stunned. He then immediately said, Grandmaster, Eternal Peace Empire can't be underestimated. Pan Gong Tso hid the golden book in his clothes and walked over with a smile. You're overestimating them. Our Roland's Golden Palace is not to be trifled with, since we have over a dozen experts of the cult master level. In addition, there are also over 100 khans in the prairie, so we don't need to be afraid of eternal peace. Actually, now that old human emperor appeared, the fate of Eternal Peace Empire is already determined. High Heavens will definitely be very willing to help us eradicate eternal peace. Old human emperor has caused a huge problem this time. Laughing, Pan Gong Tso walked out of the sacred hall. After summoning all the strong practitioners in the Golden Palace that was on Celestial Being Realm, Life and Death Realm as well as Divine Bridge Realm, he left for the border station. Grand Shaman didn't dare to hesitate. He immediately rushed toward West Earth. Pan Gong Tso brought all experts that had cultivated a primordial spirit. They boarded a treasure ship while some of the shaman kings on Celestial Being Realm grew bird wings to drag the treasured ship through the sky. The speed at which they moved was as fast as lightning. Even so, they still took almost 6 days to reach the border station. Behind it, there were cows and goats roaming over the mountains while the Khans from all over the prairie brought their troops to kill the livestock for meat. Eternal Peace Empire was weakened by the principle of taking their own lives when they were weak, so Pan Gong Tso personally ordered the entire prairie to unify. With Khan Rwandi as the leader, they began an invasion. At the same time, they allied with Wolf Store Country, which would attack from the north. When they conquered Eternal Peace, they agreed to split the lands equally. With the Prairie Army in a deadlock, more and more troops came to reinforce it. Plenty of experts showed up, but Qingmen Pass was also being reinforced by people hurrying over to the battlefield. This caused the situation to stay in the deadlock. When Qin Mu and the rest arrived, it was the crucial moment for the fight over Duck Tongue Zone. However, Village Chief had quelled the battle with the sword of founding Emperor Sea of Blood. When Khan Rwandi heard that Pan Gong Tso was coming with the strong practitioners of Roland's Golden Palace, he immediately led most of the Khans of the prairie to welcome him. Even though Pan Gong Tso was his son in name, his true identity was that of the Grandmaster. Even though this made him sad, he was also delighted. After Pan Gong Tso had taken over the body, the attitude of Roland's Golden Palace in regards to him had changed for the better. Everyone fully supported him to become the overlord of the prairie. "We pay our respects to Grandmaster," Khan Rwandi shouted out while leading all the Khans. Pan Gong Tso immediately came forward to personally help him up with a smile. "You're my father in this generation, so there's no need to be too formal. For that sea of sword lights that you mentioned, I've already got an idea about who caused it. I've come this time to put you at ease." While maintaining the bowing posture, Khan Rwandi shuddered at the memory of the sword lights that had covered the sky and earth like a vast sea. Heavenly Devil Cult Master's abilities are extraordinary and his sword skills are invincible. Him being in Qingmen Pass is making it hard for the elites of our prairie to make a move. Grandmaster? Heavenly Devil Cult Master? Pan Gong Tso laughed aloud and stamped his feet. Only then did he manage to stifle his mirth. Heavenly Devil Cult Master is merely a 16-year-old brat. His abilities are very superficial, so how is he worth you attaching importance to him? Don't worry about him, since he's on the opposite side. Let me meet him and put you be at ease. Khan Rwandi let out a sigh of relief. If we could get the help of Grandmaster and the Shaman Kings, we would definitely win a victory in raising the flag and conquering Middle-earth. Pan Gong Tso led everyone into the pass, and the city gate in front of him opened up to allow them out of the impregnable pass and toward Duck Tongue Zone. Once they were between the two impregnable passes, Pan Gong Tso ordered someone to shout, "Heavenly Devil Cult Master Qin Mu, Grandmaster has come forth to talk with you. Do you dare to come out of the city?" The person who had shouted out was a shaman king of the cult master level. His voice resounded throughout the whole Qingmen Pass. Qin Mu was forging heaven's rings with everyone, so he was caught off guard by the words. "Pan Gong, so that rogue still dares to appear? Once I kill him, his shaman spell of paying respect to the soul will disappear. It's a pity Grandpa Butcher is not here, or he would be more than willing to kill him." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had already come to Qin Mu's side, and beside him was Cripple and Village Chief, as well as numerous generals of Eternal Peace Empire's army. Qin Mu took out his painting of Pan Gong Tso paying respect to the soul, revealing the vividly drawn devil. "I've never seen it before." Village Chief shook his head. Cripple also shook his head, followed by the generals of the army. "This devil is weird. We have never seen its kind before. Qin Mu looked at Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who pondered for a bit before saying, "When I and my wife were invited to Little Jade Capital, I seem to have seen a similar sculpture. However, I didn't ask about it." While they talked, shouts continued to ring outside. Qin Mu put away the painting and rose with a smile. "If we kill Pangongtso, there will be no need to go to Little Jade Capital. Grandpa Village Chief, come with me to get rid of him without a word." Village Chief shook his head. "I'm the human emperor, so I can't meddle with the struggles of the mortal world. Otherwise, no one would listen to the words of the human emperor." "Then what's the use of that human emperor's seal?" Qin Mu hated the human emperor's seal so much that he wanted to throw it away. This thing was absolutely useless and yet still managed to have so many restrictions. However, if he were to throw it away, Village Chief would be hurt. In addition, he hadn't yet been able to defeat Village Chief on the same realm, so he could only abide by his promise and keep it. "Pangongtso, that beast, actually dared to steal the stuff of my Qin family and now even comes to show off in front of me. Isn't he dancing on the graves of my ancestors by doing this?" Qin Mu was filled with anger and said ruthlessly, "Grandpa Cripple, come with me. Let's steal until he becomes bankrupt." Cripple's eyes lit up and he chuckled. "Let us go and see who is the thief god with sacred hands." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 335. The Young and Old Divine Thieves. Cripple and Qin Mu walked out of Qingmen Pass, and many generals in the pass frowned. Bianjinyun immediately consulted Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, who said while shaking his head, "There's no need to help them. With that cripple around, no one will be able to kill Cult Master Qin." Cripple. Everyone looked at Cripple only to see this old man having all four limbs and walking quickly. How was he crippled? "His heart is crippled." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's face was slightly unpleasant. "His morality and conduct are crippled, his body improper, and his shadow lame with deformed intentions. Forget about him." Shan Yoshin, how many heaven's rings has Ministry of Works and Imperial College forged? 14,000. Shan Yoshin said, "They are already installed on the true origin cannons. Just one more day, and we can finish making the remaining few thousand. When that time comes, we will be able to attack the enemy encampment." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at the impregnable pass in front of them and said indifferently, "There's no need for one more day. Pass down orders to all the troops for them to get ready at once. Form a formation with the flying ships, and we shall push forward. General Bien, Grand Marshal General who supports the state, General of White Horse, Pillars of State, Duke Wei, General of Pillars of States, General who crowns the army, General of Cherishing Transformation." He pointed out the names one by one, and numerous generals of Eternal Peace Empire walked out of the ranks to wait for their orders. After being through the rebellion of the previous Crown Prince Ling Yuxia, the officials under him were all cleared out, but Eternal Peace Empire was a place of talents after all. The Emperor selected numerous lower officials for promotion, so there was no case of a temporary deficit in manpower. Mobilize the army behind the pass so it stays behind the flying ships. They will pave the way while the army behind with clean up the rest. Meanwhile, all of you shall focus on the experts of Divine Bridge and Life and Death Realm, killing them when you get the chance. All the generals' hearts became stern, and Duke Wei asked, "Imperial Preceptor, Cult Master Qin is still on the front lines. If we attack now, I'm afraid the other side would lay their hands on him." Imperial Preceptor revealed a smile. "The moment he retreats is the moment we attack, but there's no need to worry about his safety. With that cripple around, there aren't many people in this world that could harm him." "Who will be the one dispatching the flying ships?" Bien Jinyun asked. The flying ships were originally scattered throughout all the army and were commanded by various generals they served to at the time. But once Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor changed the strategy to have the flying ships pave the way, they needed to set up another army with strong practitioners proficient in offense to dispatch the ships. Only then could they deal with the ever-changing situation on the battlefield instantly. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered as he said solemnly, "Summon all the high-ranking military officers over, and also, Get all the directorates of Imperial College as well. After a moment, several hundred high-ranking military officers and numerous directorates hurried to his side. We have a total of 245 flying ships, which is equivalent to 245 flying swords. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor swept his gaze over all of them and said solemnly, "Those who are proficient in sword skills and can control 245 swords at the same time, please step forward." Over 50 people from the high-ranking military officers and directorates did so. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's vital chi burst forth and transformed into flying swords that surrounded his body. "Attack me! The one who can break through my sword formation and stab my body shall become the new army's commander-in-chief." The 50-strong practitioners heard what he said and all executed their sword skills to attack. In an instant, countless sword lights swirled around rapidly, resulting in incomparably loud clanking sounds. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stood motionlessly, controlling the countless sword lights with his mind, blocking the attacks of the 50 high-ranking military officers and directorates. Suddenly, a general got hit in the chest by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword light, but it didn't injure him. That general immediately fell back. After a moment, people began to continuously fall back, until only 10 or so sword skill experts were still attacking. Duke Wei, Bian Jinyun, and the rest exclaimed in their hearts when they saw this sight. The remaining people were all outstanding existences in regards to sword skills, and their attainments in that field were at the standard of a professional. The only thing they lacked was cultivation. It was truly gratifying for Eternal Peace Empire to have so many talents. After some more time, the 10 or so people were finally left with 3 that were still attacking Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Suddenly, a sword sun burst forth, its red light that glowed like a fire lighting up all the surroundings. A sword light then stabbed out from the red sun and penetrated through Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skill defense, making a small hole at the corner of his clothes. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his hand and had the 3 of them stop. He looked toward the man that had stabbed his clothes and asked, "The Directorate of Hall of Hidden Light?" The one who had stabbed the corner of his clothes was none other than Sword Hall Master. He then bowed and said, "Hall of Hidden Light, Jian Sansheng." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded and looked at the other general who had executed the Red Sun. The sunset sword skill he had used earlier had let Sword Hall Master succeed. "General of Guide Commandery Yuen Chuyun?" Yuen Chuyun bowed and greeted. "Imperial Preceptor." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor revealed a smile. "Jian Sansheng, you are the new Commander-in-Chief. Yuen Chuyun, you are the new Assistant Commander-in-Chief. I shall give you an hour to familiarize yourselves with the names of the ships and their military officers. Memorize all of them. Remember, when you command the ships, don't think of them as ships, but as your flying swords." Sword Hall Master's eyes sparkled, and he asked solemnly, "What does Imperial Preceptor want us to do?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor pointed at the majestic and impregnable pass at the opposite side and said, "Raise the Heelan Pass to the ground." Sword Hall Master's sturdy body trembled, and he turned his head to look at the impregnable pass with heroism burning in his chest. In the meantime, Qin Mu and Cripple had already reached Duck Tongue Zone. "Qin Gongso, I trust you have been well since we last met?" Qin Mu said loudly while smiling. Pan Gongso smiled and looked left and right. "Khan Rwandi, this is Heavenly Devil Cult Master. He isn't someone who can execute that sea of sword light, right?" Behind him, Khan Rwandi's lightning-fast eyes scanned Qin Mu, and he said solemnly, "It's this youth." When he came to the battlefield, that terrifying sword skill burst forth and made everyone hold their breaths. Qin Mu looked at Pan Gongso's back, slightly stunned. Behind him were numerous Khans and Shaman Kings of Roland's Golden Palace. However, one of them was extremely eye-catching. His figure towered over all others since he was much taller even than Sword Hall Master and Apothecary. Even though it was the end of summer, he was still wearing a thick raccoon skin with a golden knife and quiver on his waist. After feeling his invasive gaze, Qin Mu could immediately guess the origin of this person. The mighty Lord of the Prairie, Khan Rwandi. Back when Grand Shaman had personally granted the title of Khan to this person, Qin Mu became the #1 divine archer in the world. His tribe was also proficient in horseback archery, so from that day onwards, Qin Mu rose in power. His martial power was definitely near the top, and he wasn't just a divine archer. When Qin Mu and Chancellor Ba Shan had met the Pangongtso who hadn't yet been taken over, his fist skills had made both Qin Mu and Chancellor Ba Shan take notice of him. Those skills had originated from Qin Mu, which showed that his battle power was not limited to the bow and arrow. People frequently compared Qin Mu and Emperor Yanfeng. Both of them were mighty leaders that had pushed ahead with bold and decisive reforms. Yet Qin Mu was more like an imitator, learning from Emperor Yanfeng's actions and reforming the messy situation on the prairie where all the tribes ruled themselves. He annexed them and eradicated all big and small shaman sections. All the experts were then taken in by him to join his army. If it was not for Roland's golden palace purposely obstructing him, he would have long united the prairie. At that time, Roland's golden palace had been worried that Qin Mu would imitate Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Yanfeng, and after uniting the prairie beat down on the golden palace. Therefore they didn't fully support him. Only after Grandmaster had reincarnated into Pangongtso and taken the leadership of the golden palace did they fully support him in his effort to unite the prairie. Qin Mu's abilities won't be any weaker than those of Emperor Yanfeng. Qin Mu smiled and walked in front of Cripple while shouting, "Pangongtso, is that your dad? Qin Mu? Behind you?" Pangongtso was unmoved and smiled. "Little slut, still trying to agitate me? Senior brother Rwandi." Qin Mu greeted Qin Mu with a face full of smiles. Heavenly Saint Cult Master pays his respects to the Khan of the Prairie. Qin Mu frowned, slightly at a loss, since Qin Mu obviously wanted to take advantage of Pangongtso. If he was to greet him back, that would make Pangongtso's seniority a level lower than that of Qin Mu. Then, in the next instant, Qin Mu would make Pangongtso call him uncle. But if he didn't return the greeting, he would be rude, and if he conquered Eternal Peace Empire in the future, Qin Mu would definitely lead Heavenly Devil Cult to cause trouble for him. Pangongtso knew what he was thinking and smiled. Qin Mu, the Qin brat drives people mad this way. A sentence from him can stifle one to death while wanting nothing more than to mince him to pieces. Now that you have seen him, you should know that all his abilities come from his mouth. He's nothing more than that. In that case, is that old man behind him the one that executed the sword light that was like a vast sea? Qin Mu asked. Pangongtso didn't recognize Cripple, so he shook his head. It's not him. It's an armless and legless old fart. Don't worry, that old fart won't make a move easily. He has too many rules which restrict him to death. Furthermore, a few days later, there will be people from high heavens coming here to get rid of him. He smiled. After he dies, you will be able to trample Qingmen Pass, walking inside it without a hitch and becoming the owner of Middle-earth. At that time, the Golden Palace will be the only sacred ground left in the world. Qin Mu immediately said. Pangongtso laughed. You don't need to be so careful. My goal isn't to have the #1 sacred ground, or the only sacred ground. My goal is much further and beyond your imagination. He remembered that golden book he had placed in his clothes, and his heart started blazing. Unconsciously, his hands formed into fists. At this moment, Qin Mu walked over with wide strides, his face full of smiles. Qin Mu is quite rude. I've greeted you, yet you didn't greet me back. Your manners are too poor. No wonder you taught this brat Pangongtso to be like this. Pangongtso's expression sunk. He wanted to reply, but Qin Mu suddenly rushed toward him while shouting, Pangongtso, you better come out and call me uncle. Let uncle smack your butt. Pangongtso was furious. When he looked over, he saw the old man still standing far away, in the same spot with a beaming face, so he immediately grew guts and rushed toward Qin Mu with a sneer. Qin brat, I didn't kill you on the ship, so I shall have you die on the battlefield this time. The two of them clashed, and their magic powers burst forth. With their divine arts exploding, the air currents swirled from the vibrations and expanded outwards. Pangongtso felt his arm go numb, and his heart trembled. I'm already at the peak of 6 Directions realm, Yet this brat is actually not weaker than me in magic power. Qin Mu put his hands together, and countless sword lights flew out from the Taotai sack on his back to attack. Pan Gong Tso immediately defended. However, the countless sword lights suddenly pulled back and transformed into a huge sparkling silver ball that came crashing down. Pan Gong Tso raised his hands to hold the huge sword pellet, but he couldn't help grunting as he got pressed into the ground. Kan Rwandi and the rest hurriedly went over to save him. So Qin Mu immediately opened his Taotai sack and pulled his sword pellet back inside. In the meantime, the figure of that beaming old man vanished. Like a phantom, it flashed past every single person. Everyone was messed up for a moment, feeling like they had been attacked by this elder. Right then, Pan Gong Tso appeared from far away, floating out from the ground while shouting, "No need to fight with him. We shall let him see true power on the battlefield." Qin Mu and the old man didn't remain to battle. Instead, they suddenly ran away, leaving 2 trails of smoke as they sprinted back to Qingmen Pass. That amiable-looking elder raised the spoils that piled up on his hands like a mountain. The clothes, accessories, and spirit weapons on Kan Rwandi and the rest had been cleanly looted, leaving all of them standing there naked and not knowing what to do. On Qin Mu's hand was a golden book, with a piece of underwear beneath it, while he was frantically escaping toward Qingmen Pass. Pan Gong Tso was stunned, then hurriedly opened up his clothes before giving off a world-shaking scream. The golden book that he had hidden in his clothes had vanished, and along with it, his underwear was gone as well. "Chase them!" Pan Gong Tso shouted sternly. Right at this moment, the city gates of Qingmen Pass opened wide, and countless soldiers and horses flooded out from inside. Flying ships rose into the air from behind the watchtower, the bows of which were pointed at Helan Pass. Giants were standing on those bows, beating battle drums. The sound they made was like the rumble of thunder. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's voice could be heard throughout the whole city. "Soldiers, raise Helan Pass to the ground." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 336. The enemy has entered 30 miles range. Pan Gong Tso was leading Kan Rwandi and the rest of the experts to chase after Qin Mu when he saw over 200 flying ships flying their flags. They covered the sky and the sun as though there were over 200 clouds covering half of the horizon and moving over. Below the flying ships, an army of strange beasts rushed out. The large creatures were moving forward like small mountains while archers sat on their backs. Behind them were chariots, mounted riders, and then the infantry in formation. They were separated into different types of troops according to the attributes of their spirit bodies, and it was a majestic sight. This formation was astonishing and puzzled Kan Rwandi. In the past, Eternal Peace Empire had the army of strange beasts in front, with the chariots and mounted riders behind. The infantry would then act as vanguard by rushing forth under the strange beasts. As for the flying ships, they would be situated in the middle of the army. Even though flying ships could float in the air, their range wasn't too great. They could easily be taken down, so they needed the protection of the middle guard. Yet right then the flying ships were at the very front. To take them down, experts needed to just swing their knife pellets into the sky from 30 miles away, and the ships would be destroyed while all of their passengers would fall off. Worse, if a pill furnace was hit, all the soldiers on the ship would die in the explosion. Qin Mu had improved the pill furnaces of the flying ships and drastically increased their firepower. However, if they exploded, it would be up to 10 times more frightening than before. Ordinary divine arts practitioners would have basically no chance to survive it. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on Qin Mu entirely. He improved the pill furnace so the flying ships could become faster, but their firepower did not catch up, so they weren't able to unleash all of the energy. Is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor crazy? Kan Rwandi thought until this point when Pan Gong Tso's voice pulled him away. "Rwandi, kill that Qin brat." Kan Rwandi was naked, his pants having been pulled down by Cripple. His golden knife and quiver were both taken away, and the luxurious raccoon cloak was also gone. However, as the leader of an empire, he still had his cultivation. When he heard Pan Gong Tso, he immediately pulled up his pants, ready to tighten his belt, but he found nothing there. His belt that was inlaid with gold and embedded with jade was gone as well. That cripple's abilities are too strong. If instead of stealing my clothes he had come to kill me, how could I have defended against him? Qin Mu shuddered and cold sweat started rolling down his body, drenching his back. However, he had overestimated Cripple. Even though Cripple's hands and feet were nimble, all of his abilities were used for stealing and then escaping for dear life. His body and hand techniques were unpredictable, but it was a pity that he relied only on his legs in close combat, so his hands lacked any combat abilities. Cripple's corporeal body divine arts were sloppy and ordinary without any strong attacking moves. If one was to really attack him, it would be difficult for him to have an exchange of many blows. The most terrifying thing about him was his body techniques. Even though Qin Mu didn't have a bow or an arrow, his cultivation was still around. His vital chi suddenly burst forth, and a figure that was like a god and a devil slowly stood up behind him. It had 4 arms and a bird's head while blazing fire shone brilliantly all over its body. This god which Qin Mu's primordial spirit materialized. Its 4 arms pulled onto the bow, and blazing fire instantly filled the air of Duck Tongue Zone. Flames whooshed and gathered toward him, forming an incomparably bright arrow between the huge bow. A vibration could be heard, and an arrow shot out. The sky and land became incomparably parched while flames caused visions to appear one after another. Wherever the arrow flew, fire dragons would seem to roll around in the yellow desert. They wreaked havoc all they went. Still topless, Qin Mu raised his right hand. With his index and middle fingers put together while his thumb was on his ring and little finger, by which a sword art was clutched, he pressed on the heart of his brows. Swoosh! The arrow of flames was incomparably quick and shot straight toward the running Cripple and Qin Mu. The arrow was so fast that no one could see its incomparably bright flames. Only a black line after the arrow had flashed past them. Pangong Tso was extremely shocked. Qin Mu was acclaimed as the #1 divine archer on the prairie, and the power displayed by his arrow had made even his heart palpitate. If I retrieve the golden book and go on to the next step to become God, I will need to guard against my convenient father. My golden book! Pangong Tso's heart was tearing apart. When he thought of how Qin Mu had stolen his golden book, he felt like he'd been stabbed in the heart before it was crushed. On the journey to the border station, he had sneakily read the golden book and memorized the circulation diagram inside it. However, the circulation diagram was extremely complicated and the barest hint of difference would be the same as walking 1,000 miles in the wrong direction. There couldn't be any mistakes in repairing the divine bridge. Pangong Tso wasn't certain that he could replicate everything he saw without a single mix-up. The arrow light caught up to Qin Mu and Cripple, who suddenly threw away everything he had stolen and stretched out his hand to grab the youth by his side. He then moved like a phantom to avoid the arrow light. Qin Mu frowned, suspicious. The abilities of this elder aren't as high as I thought. While his fingers on the heart of his brow remained unmoving, the arrow light changed its direction in midair to shoot toward Cripple again. The old man's body techniques changed one after another, and he literally flashed here and there in an instant, giving people a feeling that he had already stepped through the obstruction of space. Cripple didn't dare to receive the arrow, so his bizarre body techniques left everyone dumbfounded, while Qin Mu found it hard to hit him. The distance between Cripple and the flying ship was decreasing faster and faster. Duke Wei rose into the air while holding the Duke sword and slashed toward the arrow light. Boom! Incomparably terrifying explosion burst forth, and Duke Wei was blown upwards from the vibration. He then rose back up and landed on a flying ship while laughing. Rwandi, you indeed have a skill or two. Rwandi's abilities were above his, so the arrow's momentum didn't slow down. Suddenly, Grand General who crowns the army stepped forward. His square sky halberd soared into the air and transformed into the claws of a dragon that stretched out to grab onto the arrow light. Grand General who crowns the army grunted, and his vital chi almost burst from the impact. His legs couldn't resist moving back repeatedly until he finally took the arrow light down. In the end, he was left overwhelmed with shock. If it wasn't for Duke Wei who had clashed with the arrow first and exhausted more than half of its power, he wouldn't have been able to receive this move at all. The Khan of Barbarian D Empire had a justified reputation. He's just a bit weaker than Imperial Preceptor and His Majesty. Once the sword light dispersed, Grand General who crowns the army stretched his hands out to grab forward. The long dragon flew back and transformed into a blood-red square sky halberd in his hands. The dragon claw changed into a small branch of the halberd which hummed as it vibrated. In Duck Tongue Zone, all the Khans and Shaman Kings were lifting their pants up, but all of them couldn't find their belts. Suddenly, the tooting of a bugle horn came from Helan Pass, which was behind them. The army of all tribes came pouring out like a flood. The troops of the prairie were proficient in horse riding, so the first to come out was the goat army. The divine arts practitioners that belonged to it weren't riding on mountain goats but barbarian goats, which were strange beasts with 2 legs. They were mixed bloods that came from goats and strange beasts of great ruins. They ate grass, but were all strong and sturdy. Barbarian goats had only 2 legs, but when they sprinted, they were like flightless birds rushing forward. Their physiques were very tall, so when they stood up, they were like small buildings. The strongest part of a barbarian goat was its horns, which curved into spirals. When the beasts came sprinting forward with lowered heads, they were akin to plows going through dozens of yards and smashing everything in their way. Meanwhile, in the air was the prairie's flying cavalry on hawk-eagle wolves. They were a sort of carnivorous strange beast which had the body of a huge wolf with wings. On the backs of the wolves were the strongest archers and knife practitioners in the prairie. It was because the troops of the prairie came and went like the wind that the army of Eternal Peace Empire couldn't gain any advantage. At that moment, the army of all tribes of the prairie rushed forth with world-shaking power, their numbers far exceeding those that came from Eternal Peace Empire. Khan Rwandi and the rest tightened up their pants around their waists with dead knots. Khan Rwandi laughed loudly. So what if a small thief stole our treasures and clothes? We are only true men when we fight on the battlefield topless, our hot blood rushing through our veins. Our grudges have all been over land and livestock so our tribesmen could live better lives. Even though the prairie is vast, there's still an end to our land. On the other hand, Eternal Peace Empire is rich and flourishing. They have plenty of women and land. Let us fight to our heart's content on this battlefield today. Once we conquer Qin Pass, Eternal Peace Empire will be our grazing land. Blood pumped in the veins of all the Khans on the battlefield. They all laughed loudly with their bare upper bodies as their heroic spirit overflowed into the heavens, dispersing all the white clouds as if washing the sky clean. Their cultivations weren't weak. There were quite a number of experts of celestial being and life and death realm. There were even a few Khans who had cultivated to divine bridge realm. Everyone's vital chi burst forth, and their primordial spirits appeared. All kinds of god and devil apparitions took shape behind them, all of them looking extremely powerful as they waited for their army to arrive. Once it did so, everyone executed their own methods. Some sprinted on the land while others flew into the air to face the fleet of Eternal Peace Empire. Pangongtso hesitated, but he didn't follow after them. He summoned a shaman king over and said solemnly, "Escort me back into the pass." That shaman king acknowledged his order, while the other shaman kings rushed toward Eternal Peace Empire's fleet. On the flagship of the fleet, Sword Hall Master stood at the bow with his clothes fluttering in the wind. Yuan Chuyun stood beside him, and the 2 generals looked at the army of the prairie that was coming closer and closer. "General, the enemy has entered the range of 160 miles. The signaler that was measuring the distance shouted loudly as he stood on the tall mast while gripping tightly on the ropes. Sword Hall's expression remained unchanged as he said, "Continue forward. Inform me when it'll be 80 miles. Yuan Chuyun's face was also indifferent, but when he heard 80 miles, he raised his eyebrows slightly. The signaler waved a flag and ordered the ships to continue forward. "General, the enemy has reached the 80-mile range." Yuan Chuyun took out his sword pellet and held it in his hand with his eyebrows raised. Sword Hall Master then said, "Call me when it's 40 miles. Yuan Chuyun frowned slightly while looking at Sword Hall Master, but he didn't say anything. The signaler's nervous voice could soon be heard again. "The enemy has reached the 40 miles range." Yuan Chunyun let out a shaky breath, and the light in his eyes began to shine in all directions like the sun. Sword Hall Master said, Send orders for all ships to heat up the true origin cannons. We will fire at 30 miles. Yuan Chuyun's palms were all sweaty as he gritted his teeth while hissing. General Jian sure can restrain himself to actually wait until 30 miles. 30 miles. It's the range of the enemy. The signaller immediately waved his flag to command all the ships. The cannon batteries instantly drew energy from the pill furnaces and waited for action after having accumulated enough for an attack. Sword Hall Master looked at the army of the prairie that poured forth while covering the horizon, the experts of celestial being and life and death realm at the front. He then explained at a speed that was neither too fast nor too slow. Imperial Preceptor's order was to raise Helan Pass to the ground and not just defeat the enemy. At 160 miles, the enemy would have the chance to escape with the main force still intact. At 80 miles, 60% of the enemy would be able to escape. At 40 miles, only 30% of the enemy would be able to escape, but the chief generals would still manage to get away. At 30 miles, even the chief general's survival rate will only be 30% at most. Yuan Chuyun sighed in admiration. Teacher Jian is still Teacher Jian. Chuyun is only able to have today's achievement after learning sword from you back then. Over 200 flying ships suddenly turned to their side with a creak. The huge bodies instantly became a barricade in the air, and the cannons fired all at once. Instantly, several thousand thick pillars of light appeared in the air. In a single face-off, many barbarian kings, khans, and shaman kings were turned into sieves and fell from the sky. Quite a few of the strong practitioners of life and death realm as well as divine bridge realm who were behind the first wave were astonished. In the meantime, Duke Wei, Grand Marshal, Grand General who crowns the army, and Grand General of Cherishing Transformation rushed out to attack them. On the flagship, Sword Hall Master personally waved the flag, and the cannons changed direction to point toward the ground. They were like sword lights slicing at the army rushing forward. Sword Hall waved his flag and split the 200 and more ships into two fleets, one flying high in the sky while the other hovered 300 yards away from the ground. Yuan Chuyun controlled the fleet above to attack the flying wolves, while Sword Hall controlled the fleet below, plowing the land in front of them as they pushed forward. With the cannon beams sweeping through the battlefield, humans and goats were thrown into disorder wherever they passed. Meanwhile, on the other side, Qin Mu and Cripple returned to Qingmen Pass to see Village Chief and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor leisurely drinking tea on the city tower. They were completely unfazed by the situation outside. Jian Sanxing can restrain himself, and his attainments in sword skills are also extraordinary. With the battlefield like his sword, he's already considered a professional. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor poured tea for Village Chief, who was waiting for him to lift the teacup to his lips when he suddenly remembered that the man before him was not apothecary. Thus he used his vital qi to lift the teacup up to take a sip. His sword skill has the shadow of your sword skill, but what's weird is that it also has the shadow of my sword skill. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor shook his head. I have never taught him before. The two of them turned their heads in unison to look at Qin Mu, who had just entered the city tower. If neither of them had taught Sword Hall his sword skills, it could only be this great cult master Qin. The two of them immediately frowned when they saw him holding a weird golden book with one hand and underwear with another. Muir, I've been forced to throw away the stuff I stole, but you haven't. So now you are the #1 divine thief in the world. Cripple praised as he stuck up his thumbs. Qin Mu shook his head and said, My abilities are way inferior to those of Grandpa Cripple. Throw it, throw it. Cripple pinched his nose and said, What's so good about Grandmaster's underwear? Quickly throw it away. Qin Mu threw the underwear out of the city tower. He then walked toward the two people that were drinking tea and threw the golden book onto the tea table. He sniffed the fragrance of the tea and smiled. I have some good tea leaves. They're from a young master called Su Shenghua who is from high heavens. I had shamelessly asked for half a bag from him. High heavens! Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and Village Chief's hearts jumped. Village Chief hurriedly asked, You met a visitor from high heavens? Did he attack you? No. Bewildered, Qin Mu said, Su Shenghua is a very amiable person. I had a clash with him and we were both equally excellent. Village chief, he's also an overlord body. An overlord body like me. The youth became excited. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 337. Details of Overlord Body. Overlord Body? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was a little bewildered. When he thought about it, he had never heard about this kind of constitution before, so he looked at Village Chief in doubt. Overlord Body sounded much better than 4 Great Spirit Bodies, but could this world really have a constitution that above 4 Great Spirit Bodies? So why hadn't he heard about it before? And from the looks of it, there seemed to be 2 of these overlord bodies in the world. Village Chief's face muscles twitched as he felt his face about to fall off. It was loose so often that it looked like it was just waiting for the moment to drop. Overlord Body again. Moore, this rascal really can't calm down. He couldn't help sighing ruefully. He had really gone old. A small lie like this could alarm him and make his heart tremble in fear of being exposed. However, who could expose him? As the previous human emperor, he had merely said a white lie, so why did he have to subject himself to such torture? Why did he always have to think of how to cover up the lie? Ever since I made up this overlord body constitution, I've lied more than I did in the past 800 years. Village Chief roused his spirit and shook his head. Moore, there can never be a second overlord body. This Su Shanghua is definitely not an overlord body. Qin Mu was puzzled, and so was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Cripple formed fists excitedly. As the only one who knows about the existence of overlord body, Village Chief usually don't breathe a word of it to anyone, but he's finally going to divulge some secrets. Village Chief's face was calm when he said at a speed that was neither fast nor slow. It seems to have been the will of heaven that there would only be one overlord body in all the previous generations. Others that seemed to look like it were all pseudo-overlord bodies, but never the real thing. It has been like this since the start of days. In one era, there can only be one person with the true overlord body. You need to remember this point. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor couldn't hide his astonishment. The only overlord body in the world. The rest were all pseudo-overlord bodies? The mysteries in this world were indeed deeper than what he had imagined. Village Chief's words alerted and thrilled him. The will of heaven, the only overlord body, pseudo-overlord bodies. There seemed to be an indescribable power controlling all of this. Cripple didn't think much about it and said excitedly, as I guessed, there's only one true overlord body in this world. Qin Mu was slightly excited, but then doubt assailed him. But Su Shenghua's cultivation and mine have no difference. To be on the same realm as me, he can only be an overlord body as well. There can only be one reason for this, Village Chief said with a solemn face. That's because you aren't hard-working enough. As the overlord body, you are actually going to be caught up by the 4 great spirit bodies or a pseudo-overlord body. You should be ashamed and reflect on yourself. Qin Mu nodded heavily and said solemnly, Grandpa Village Chief, don't worry. I will definitely work even harder. Come to think of it, I have indeed been slacking for the past few days. If I'm improving, Su Shanghua is also improving, but if I slacken, he might really surpass me. Village Chief relaxed, thinking to himself, Moore is still too innocent, getting tricked by me just like this to work even harder. If this brat gets defeated by Su Shanghua, he will definitely think that he hadn't been working hard enough, so next time I will have even more excuses. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered, and he asked sincerely, Dao brother, you said there's an overlord body and also pseudo-overlord bodies, so there seems to be some relation. Would you mind explaining it in detail? Village Chief's eyes instantly became big. Qin Mu was easy to trick, and Cripple was the same, since he only liked stealing and didn't know much about the martial world. But Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was a whole different kind of person. Cough, cough. Between overlord body and pseudo-overlord body is the struggle over fate, Village Chief said solemnly. There's only one overlord body in this world, and there can only be one however. There can be many pseudo-overlord bodies. I have once heard of a legend according to which if a pseudo-overlord body kills the overlord body, they can snatch its fate, becoming the true overlord body from a pseudo one. As for whether that is true, I don't know. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went deep into thoughts before raising his head to said, "The struggle over fate between Overlord Body and Pseudo-Overlord Bodies is indeed extremely disturbing. However, how does a Pseudo-Overlord Body know the opponent is the true Overlord Body? If they don't know who the Overlord Body is, how do they kill it?" Village Chief was furious. Was this scoundrel done or not? How was he supposed to make up even more of the story? Overlord Body and Pseudo-Overlord Bodies have an unimaginable connection. When the two meet, they can sense each other. Village Chief stabilized his mind and said, "From the moment they meet each other, they will have a feeling of appreciation for each other's talent. Yet they are natural enemies that will have to fight to their last breath." When he was out of ideas about how to continue from there, Qin Mu's eyes suddenly lit up and he clapped in surprise. "The moment I met Su Shanghua, I had this kind of feeling. No wonder, no wonder. We met on the river when he was sitting in a pleasure boat. At the time, he stopped the boat when he saw me to invite me over. So that was because of the connection between Overlord Body and Pseudo-Overlord Bodies." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor no longer doubted it and raised his head to look at the sky in a daze. "Su Shanghua is from high heavens, and the god I met which sent the disaster is also from high heavens. What kind of place is it? To actually have gods and even an Overlord Body? Dao brother, you should know that place, right? They are just fake gods." Village Chief also raised his head to look at the azure sky. In their west was an incomparably fierce battlefield, but none of them looked at it, having no concern in regards to the situation there. High heavens consists of nothing more than a bunch of lackeys. They are the eyes planted by gods to oversee this world, Village Chief said softly. Your Eternal Peace Empire's snow disaster had left people in a terrible situation, and the land hadn't recovered even now. But High Heaven's disaster is merely an ordinary meteorological attack. If a real god sent a disaster your way, he retracted his gaze and said, "East Sea is 30,000 yards deep and it had sunk in one night. The east of Great Ruins was originally a sea, but it had become land and mountains overnight." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's hair stood on end. "I have pitted myself against high heavens all my life, and they aren't easy to deal with. However, the existences behind high heavens are even harder to deal with." Village Chief looked at where his arms and legs were severed and fell into a daze. He mumbled, "You will meet them, Muir will also meet them." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at the places where the limbs were missing on the old man. The scars left by a sword may have seemed ordinary to other people's eyes, but in his eyes, those of the current generation's sword god, there was boundless marvel within them. He knew well how terrifying was the person who had severed Village Chief's arms and legs. High heavens will send disaster on Eternal Peace once more. Village Chief let out a shaky breath and said, "However, the main enemy of high heavens is still the human emperor. I fought with them for several hundred years, but the current me only has some 2-3 years left. But there's also you who have comprehended the sword path, so you can now fight with them. In the future, there'll be Muir as well. Now that I've walked out of Great Ruins, there will be visitors coming to find me in the next few days. I'll fight them one more time." He said it indifferently, but the three of listeners could hear a hint of resolution in his voice. "Human Emperor can't die on the bed." Village Chief revealed a smile and said softly, "The bed is not my resting place." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor raised his head once again and said softly, "High heavens, one day, the cavalry of my eternal peace will trample on that place. But first we shall trample that Heelan Pass." He stood up and said, "Everyone, please move to Heelan Pass." A treasured carriage rolled up and came to the top of the city. Qin Mu carried Village Chief up and placed him in the treasured carriage while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor drove the carriage with a smile. "Let us continue our conversation at Heelan Pass." Cripple picked up the golden book on the table and threw it back to Qin Mu while saying, "Grandmaster's book. No idea what kind of harmful and evil techniques are recorded inside." Qin Mu caught the golden book and shook his head. "This doesn't belong to Grandmaster. It's a book from my Qin family that he stole." Cripple snorted. "Muir, you are definitely not hardworking enough. How could you still be robbed by that brat after learning my heaven-pilfering son's switching hand? You are better off staying as the number 2 divine thief in the world. I said I wanted to be number 2. You are the one that wanted to push me ahead. Qin Mu flipped open the golden book and said in astonishment, Pan Gong Tso actually opened up the book. It was originally sealed. That's right, Grandpa Village Chief. I have finally met my father. Village Chief's mind was suddenly blown, and he cried out, You have met visitors from Carefree Village? Qin Mu placed the golden book down with a hint of sorrow on his face. I met him in the treasured ship at Ghost Valley, but he had already used a forbidden technique and become a tree man. He signed the Pact of Earth Count with Saturn Sovereign so he couldn't open his eyes to see me. He taught me a lot of stuff, but we still had to part ways. Qin Mu stared blankly in front of himself. He then shook his head and threw all the messy thoughts out. He told everyone about his encounters in Ghost Valley and Yudu World, making the 3 people dumbfounded. These kinds of weird encounters birthed a longing in them, but it was mixed with a sense of fear. The many frightening secrets hidden within the treasured ship stunned them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was greatly shaken. Not only was Qin Mu the overlord body, he even had a father that was like a god. How do the people of Carefree Village become gods? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor suddenly recalled that the divine bridges of the people of Carefree Village were connected to the celestial heavens. The people of Little Jade Capital had told him before that the divine bridges of everyone in this world were broken. Everyone except for the people of Carefree Village, whose divine bridges was connected to the celestial heavens. Didn't this mean that Qin Mu's divine bridge would also connect him to the celestial heavens? He turned back to look at Qin Mu, but the youth didn't know what he was thinking about. He instead picked up the golden book again and flipped open to take a look. Ahead of them, the fleet of flying ships had already crushed everything in its path and was about to reach Helan Pass. Duck Tongue Zone was filled with corpses of Barbarian D Empire's divine arts practitioners that were killed by true origin cannons. Sword Hall Master Jian Sansheng and General of Guide Commandery Yuan Chuyu used flying ships as swords. The 2 sword professionals controlled the flying ships to massacre the army of the prairie, and after the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, the army of the barbarians crumbled. With their will to fight crushed by the 14,000 true origin cannons, they escaped back to Helan Pass like a flood. What followed after was a one-sided massacre. Even with the shaman kings and various khans doing their best, they couldn't stop the flood of the escapees that surged back into the pass. Eternal Peace Imperial drove the carriage quite slowly. The time was calculated so that when Sword Hall Master took down Helan Pass, the carriage would enter the city. Within it, Qin Mu looked at the first page of the golden book with a serious face. He suddenly rose and vital chi flew out from his fingertip, transforming into all kinds of rulers. There were circular ones, square ones, triangular ones, and semicircular ones. They had all kinds of angles and metric systems to measure the blueprints on the first page. Muir, what are you doing? Cripple asked curiously. Measuring the Magpie Bridge, Qin Mu said without even raising his head. The technique in this golden book of my Qin family is a little weird. If I wanted to cultivate it, I would need to calculate every corner of the vital chi on this blueprint flawlessly. This picture might be... It might be... Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 338, Broad Mindset. What is it? Cripple asked in bewilderment. Qin Mu stroked his chin and plucked out a beard hair while saying, I think the techniques in this book detail the method to connect the divine bridge. Cripple didn't hear clearly and asked, What bridge? Divine bridge. Qin Mu continued to take measurements while saying, Divine treasures aren't like the meridians in the human body, who are right there so one can execute the technique just with one look. Divine treasures are empty spaces, so when vital chi need to move around there, each and every millimeter possesses a different dimension. Thus, I need to measure the specific dimensions. It's hard to determine the coordinates in space, and any carelessness would result in a mistake. Cripple's face was blank as he stared at Qin Mu changing a scale to continue measuring the picture in the golden book. Qin Mu took out brush and paper to write down the data of his measurements. Without even raising his head, he continued, If there's a mistake in the dimensions, The smallest mistake at the digits of Mo who is no different from a mistake of 1,000 miles. My calculations have to be accurate and reach all the way to the digits behind Mo who. Furthermore, the size of the human body in the painting is different from the size of a real human body. The size of the divine treasure here is also different from the divine treasures of a real human, so let me calculate the underlying numerical values first. The size of everyone's divine bridge divine treasure is different, but with the underlying numerical values, one will be able to cultivate using ratio. In that case, they will be able to cultivate the secrets of Magpie Bridge. Cripple blurted out again. What bridge? Bewildered, Qin Mu smiled. Magpie Bridge. Grandpa Cripple, you seem to be in a daze. I shan't talk to you anymore. This part here is troublesome to calculate and is also very difficult. I will need to spend a very long time. Suddenly, Village Chief's head popped over, and he asked with excitement, What bridge? Qin Mu was then even more bewildered. Village Chief, you are also in a daze? Magpie Bridge. That's not it. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned back and said quickly, That's not it. Before Magpie Bridge you had clearly said Divine Bridge. That's right. Cripple immediately said. I've also heard Divine Bridge. Village Chief nodded repeatedly. It was Divine Bridge. Qin Mu came to a realization and smiled. The divine bridge of this man in the painting is broken, and the technique he uses to repair it is called Magpie Bridge. I was just calculating the mathematical reasoning needed in Secrets of Magpie Bridge. This technique is very difficult to cultivate, and there are way too many things that need to be measured here. Technique used to repair the divine bridge. The aura of the three men suddenly erupted, and the carriage that was flying in midair was shattered into pieces. The broken fragments then turned into powder from the vibrations caused by the terrifying aura. Qin Mu immediately rose into the sky while holding the golden book and the data he'd measured next to his chest. His clothes dyed dark from the spilled ink. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Village Chief, and Cripple nearly grabbed for the golden book. But once they saw Qin Mu hugging it to his chest, they paused and pulled back their hands, barely able to contain the excitement in their hearts. Luckily, this golden book is not afraid of being stained by ink. Otherwise, your sins would be huge, Qin Mu grumbled. Village Chief immediately said, Land on the ground first. The four of them dropped down, and everywhere around them was corpses. Some places were even blazing with fire and billowing with smoke. Those were traces left behind by fire divine arts. In the meantime, the army of Barbarian D Empire banged on the gates of Helan Pass in hopes to escape, but the guards kept the city gate tightly shut, unwilling to open it to let them in. This was to prevent Eternal Peace Empire from taking the chance to invade. The defeated army was actually bashing against Helan Pass frantically. The high wall crumbled continuously from being bashed by the numerous strong practitioners, and shattered rocks began to fly around. However, what they broke through was the outer city wall since it was wide enough, but the inner wall still stood strong. The soldiers guarding the city executed their divine arts and spirit weapons at the ground below, attacking both friend or foe, killing the comrades with whom not long ago they had been fighting on the same side. All kinds of vulgarities were hurled from below the city wall, turning the situation outside too horrible to see. The corpses below the city piled up into a mountain. In front of Helan Pass, the fleet led by Sword Hall Master and Yuan Chiyun stopped 60 miles away and didn't move forward anymore. True origin cannons shot continuously, smashing the city tower and gate into pieces. Instantly, countless escapees poured into the city like a flood. The hands and feet of Pangong Tso, who was in the city, turned ice cold. The city gate was destroyed, and the defeated army rushed into the city. Helan Pass no longer had any chance of stopping the enemy's advance. The defeated army fell onto the guards inside the pass, who found it hard to form formations, so they decided to make a run for it as well. If the enemy took this chance to rush in and massacre them in an orderly manner, the prairie would definitely suffer a complete loss. Bring me away immediately. Pangong Tso steeled his heart and ordered the Shaman King beside him. Abandon the city. Retreat out of Helan Pass. That Shaman King immediately picked him up and flew out of Helan Pass. On the way, Pangong Tso said sternly, Have the disciples of our Roland's golden palace all leave the battlefield. The heart of that shaman king trembled, and he asked in a trembling voice, Grandmaster, if our disciples of Roland's golden palace retreat, the army won't have any way to survive. But Roland's golden palace will survive. Pan Gong Tso was extremely calm. By defending, the disciples of our Roland's golden palace will only die in this city. We have to preserve our strength. The true battlefield is on the prairie. The reputation of our Roland's golden palace is not due to the respect and worship of the tribes. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wants to take over the prairie, he will have to pay a big price. The Shaman King immediately gathered his vital qi and transformed it into a world-shaking shout that spread throughout the battlefield. It ordered the disciples of Roland's golden palace to retreat. After that, the situation became even more disorderly. The heart of the army was totally gone, and everyone wanted to just escape for their lives. They poured through the city gate with people squeezing past one another, trampling on the fallen. There were some who had cultivated flying divine arts, so they flew up into midair and were shot down by the true origin cannons. Yu and Chiyun controlled the sky so that no divine arts practitioners of Barbarian D Empire could escape in this way. Sword Hall Master in the meantime controlled the ground, but he didn't block the people from escaping back into the pass. Instead, he wiped out all the enemies on the land in front of him, forcing the rest to escape even more frantically. Below the flying ships, the army of Eternal Peace Empire poured forward to clean up the remnants on the battlefield. Pan Gong Tso turned back to take a look at Helan Pass, which was already starting to crumble. Fire blazed in the city, and thick smoke billowed up into the sky. The soldiers of Barbarian D Empire were all escaping for their lives. Some of them tried to scale Helan Mountain when they couldn't get out of the city, but most of them fell and became meat paste. Numerous great shamans and shaman kings flew back and gathered around Pan Gong Tso. There were fear and despair on everyone's faces, but Pan Gong Tso was calm as he instructed. Immediately disperse and poison all the water sources in the prairie with shaman poison to have the plague wreak havoc on the land. If the army of Eternal Peace Empire kills its way in, they will all die miserably. Grandmaster! The hearts of all the great shamans and shaman kings trembled violently, and one shaman king said with a sob, all the tribesmen on the prairie will be poisoned to death as well. Pan Gong Tso was indifferent. The prairie is big enough. As long as we don't poison all the big cities, we can still preserve a portion of the tribesmen. But there are so many nomadic small tribes. Pan Gong Tso was expressionless. Those are all poor and lowly people. For them to die along with the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire, it's worth it. Immediately disperse and poison the water. There can be no delay. Otherwise, when the army of Eternal Peace Empire reaches here, their first target will be Roland's Golden Palace. Most of the great shamans and shaman kings fell into a daze before dispersing in all directions. Pan Gong Tso overlooked Helan Pass, where smoke rose from the fires of war, shrouding the crumbling once impregnable pass. He turned around and walked toward the Golden Palace while muttering, it's been so many years, about 7,000 or 8,000 years, right? My heart is already as calm as an old well, without a single ripple. This is the first time, right? The first time I have the feeling of wanting to struggle with all my might like in my first lifetime. Eternal Peace Empire, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Heavenly Devil Cult Master. You guys have once again lit up my fighting spirit. In the battlefield, Qin Mu moved a few corpses to one side and opened up the Golden Book to let Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Village Chief, and Cripple see its contents. The three heads gathered together and looked nervously at the writings and pictures on the page while frantically calculating and memorizing everything. Marvelous, truly marvelous. How did the people of Carefree Village think of such an intricate method to actually connect the divine bridge like this? How immense of a calculation ability is required to calculate such precise markings before transforming them into a technique? The trio exclaimed endlessly, until Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said, brothers, can I flip the page? Magpie Bridge shouldn't be all there is. There are definitely other techniques on the next page. However, the calculations there will be even more intricate and require the result of the calculation on Magpie Bridge as a basis. The golden book was flipped to the next page, and there was another wave of exclamations. It's indeed the next technique that's calculated off the basis of Magpie Bridge. Secrets of Mysterious Guide is truly remarkable. It's literally building a pavilion in the air. To be able to calculate to this step, this is definitely a godly calculation. This is not what one person could calculate. This is a technique which had probably gathered the wisdom of everyone in Carefree Village in order to be calculated. Quick, quick, quick. Flip to the next page. What are you looking at me for? I have no hands. After the three of them looked at it for quite some time, loud explosions and cheers suddenly came from far away. Qin Mu raised his head to look over and gave a cough. Helan Pass has been conquered. Without saying anything, the trio continued to read the golden book. Qin Mu shook his head. Shouldn't we be going over? The sky is going to turn dark soon. If we stay at Duck Tongue Zone, we will be in danger when the darkness invades at night. This is great ruins after all. The trio remained silent. Qin Mu was bored to death, and after waiting for a moment more, he couldn't resist saying, "No matter for how long you guys look at it, if you can't calculate the mathematical reasoning in the technique, any hasty cultivations will end up for naught." The trio then finally lifted their head. They reluctantly pulled their gazes away from the golden book, and Qin Mu immediately asked, "Grandpa Village Chief, do you have confidence in patching your divine bridge?" Village Chief shook his head and said, "I don't have much lifespan left, so it will depend on my fate whether I can patch my divine bridge before I die from old age. From the three kinds of techniques in this book, patching the divine bridge is no easy task." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded. Before that, we first need to calculate the mathematical reasoning inside these three techniques. This point is very important and we must build the algebra model as soon as possible. Once that is done, we will be able to spread this knowledge. Cripple sneered. Imperial Preceptor, you want to spread this technique that could make people become gods and devils, but have you asked permission from the person from Carefree Village's Qin family? After all, these three techniques don't belong to you. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was stunned for a moment, then said apologetically, "I only thought if this technique can or cannot be spread, but I forgot to ask the owner." Cult Master Qin. Qin Mu smiled. "I didn't plan to keep it to myself. I was just thinking that we should spread it out as well, since there's no need to keep it only for myself." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked into his eyes in an attempt to know his true intention, but he could only see Qin Mu's incomparably clear gaze. He suddenly sighed. "Old Human Emperor, I finally understand why you chose him as your successor. He indeed has the quality and the breadth of mind to be the Human Emperor. He may be young, but his mindset is broad enough. Muir has been taught by us, so of course his mindset is broad enough." Village Chief said calmly. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 339. General Bien. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor knew the backgrounds of the 9 elders, he would know why Qin Mu had the gaze and breadth of mind that others of his age did not. The 9 elders of Disabled Elderly Village were Qin Mu's closest kin and also his teachers. Among these 9, there was the current Rulai, the spear god of the past, the number 1 in forging treasures with a penchant for mischievousness Mute, the once incomparably handsome yet ruthless Jade-Face Poison King Apothecary, and the saintess of heavenly devil cult that charmed both the gods and devils in the world. There was also Deaf, who was honored as art saint by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Cripple, who had never slipped up and could escape from his grasp despite having a leg severed, and Butcher, who was acclaimed as Heaven Knife, brandishing his knives to fight with the gods. There was also the glorious human emperor of his generation, Village Chief. All of them were broad-minded and open. Some were emotional, some merciful, some steady, some crafty, some good at keeping to themselves, some filled with heroic spirit and hot-bloodedness, some good at scheming, and some were ruthless. However, what all of them had was utter sincerity, the heart of a newborn. It was because of such a village and such people that Qin Mu had been groomed into a person that he was, one that even the saint that appears once every 500 years admired. Qin Mu didn't feel anything special about himself, however. After walking out of disabled elderly village, he didn't think he was very powerful. After all, since he was the overlord body, it was natural for him to get some accomplishments, so there was no need to make a fuss out of nothing. However, in the eyes of others, he was simply a monster. No matter if it was poisoning or saving people, or even forging, stealing, painting, and calligraphy, he was one of the professionals in this world. Only Qin Mu's battle prowess wasn't caught in the eyes of others. He had cultivated diligently to raise his abilities, but this point wasn't as eye-catching in eternal peace where the stars were bright. Yet even this most unremarkable battle prowess could cause Pan Gongzhou to suffer over and over again after having swept through his peers. Qin Mu didn't have high attainments in algebra when he had left disabled elderly village, but he had improved by leaps and bounds afterward. Even people from Dao sect might not have comprehended computational canon of supreme mystery as well as he did. Even though Qin Mu wasn't a person from Dao sect, he had thoroughly studied computation canon of supreme mystery in detail. He had started late, yet he had reached the end first. There were not many people who could surpass him in algebra in this world. The more Imperial Preceptor got into contact with him, the more he felt that this youth was extraordinary. If we want to transform the content in the Golden Book into algebra models, we will need people who are proficient in algebra to assist. Qin Mu put away the Golden Book and continued, "This first technique, Secrets of Magpie Bridge, I can finish the measurements in 1 month and construct the algebra model. However, the second technique, Secrets of Mysterious Guide, and the third technique, Secrets of Divine Crossing, have too many things which need to be calculated. If there's only me to sort them out, I will probably take a year. That's way too long." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Village Chief, and Cripple revealed grim looks. To construct the algebra mode, they would need to measure every angle in the space of the Golden Book, using numerals to reconstruct the coordinates of the 3 techniques in space. This point was of utmost importance. After having the algebra model, using the ratio of the divine bridge in the Golden Book on one's own divine bridge for measurement, one could calculate the coordinates and determine how to circulate the techniques in their own divine treasures. Only then could one manage to learn the secrets of Magpie Bridge and construct the Magpie Bridge. Once when it patched the divine bridge and extended it, could the next step be taken, which was Secrets of Mysterious Guide, refining a mysterious guide bridge from the celestial heavens on the other side. After Secrets of Mysterious Guide were cultivated, they could then learn Secrets of Divine Crossing. If there was a mistake in any of the calculations of Magpie Bridge, Mysterious Guide Bridge, and Divine Crossing Bridge, they wouldn't be able to match one another. All efforts would be for naught, and everything done up until then would be wasted. In Dao sect, the one with the best algebra is Old Dao Master. However, he retired and went God knows where. The next one would be the current Dao Master, who was before Daozi Lin Xian. Qin Mu continued measuring while saying, "His attainments in algebra are extremely high. I saw him execute Dao Sword before. His algebra is very strong." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's head started aching as he said slowly, "Dao Sect and Eternal Peace Empire don't have a good relationship, but we need to invite them over. Besides the Golden Book, we also need them for Sunshot Divine Cannon. That weapon is extremely important and we definitely need to make it. With just Dao Sect's manpower alone, it won't be enough to complete these 2 things, so I'll still need to go to Little Jade Capital as well." However, he looked in the direction of the prairie and his head ached even more. Now that Barbarian D Empire was defeated, it was the best time to conquer the prairie. He definitely couldn't let go of this chance. Inviting Dao Sect over, heading to Little Jade Capital, sending the army into the prairie to overthrow Roland's Golden Palace. All of these things were extremely important, yet he didn't know a cloning technique. Meanwhile, in the north, Wolf Store Country was still attacking Eternal Peace. With so many things to handle at once, Imperial Preceptor's head was about to explode. "I'm very familiar with Dao Master, so I can go to Dao Sect. Maybe Dao Master Lin Xian can be moved." Qin Mu smiled before continuing, "I can also take a trip to Little Jade Capital. I've met Wang Muran and his master, Wanderer Zhen, before." "I killed Wanderer Zhen," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said. "Your heavenly devil cult master, so Little Jade Capital might not treat you nicely." Qin Mu looked at Village Chief and Cripple. "Since I've nothing to do, It's good to take a walk now that I'm out. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor understood and said, "All right, you guys shall go to Little Jade Capital while I raise the prairie and eradicate Roland's golden palace. 100 of its treasures are mine." Qin Mu immediately said, "You promised to let me choose anything." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor replied solemnly, "Don't worry. My promises always count." Qin Mu relaxed and smiled. "Village Chief, Grandpa Cripple, let's return to Qingmen Pass. We shall bring Xiong Xiu and her daughter, as well as Fatty Dragon, to Dao Sect and Little Jade Capital." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor immediately walked toward Helan Pass while Qin Mu and the rest returned to Qingmen Pass to fetch Xiong Xiu and her daughter. The youth then lifted Village Chief up and placed him in the herb basket. Qin Mu then suddenly came to a realization. "Crap. I've never been to Little Jade Capital." Village Chief said indifferently, "I've been there before. There are only bags of old bones there, stinky and tough. Even if you go over there, you might not be able to move them." Cripple rubbed his palms in excitement. "Little Jade Capital, I've not been there before. Without stealing from this sacred ground, my life won't be complete. A pity old Ma is not here." Xiong Cheer raised her head and looked at Cripple seriously. "Grandpa Cripple, you will be beaten to death for stealing." Cripple was rather pleased with this little girl and caressed her head while beaming at her. "Does Cheer want to be the number 3 sacred hands in this world?" "Yes." The little girl's voice was loud and clear. In Helan Pass, all the troops were consolidating their armaments, while chief generals came forth to report to Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor about the losses. The casualties weren't too severe and couldn't be compared to the small-scale battle previously. All kinds of spirit weapons and supplies like rations and spirit medicine were mostly untouched. Sword Hall Master and Yuan Chuyun also came forth to report. "Imperial Preceptor, there are no more medicinal stones." "What?" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor cried out. "The medicinal stones for the new army have already been finished," Sword Hall Master said once more. "Impossible!" Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor suddenly stood up. "The flying ships were stocked with 3 months' worth of medicinal stones, so how can they all be gone in a day?" Sword Hall Master didn't have many words. "Finished by firing the cannons." Imperial Preceptor, the cannons improved by Academician Qin have a huge consumption in regards to energy, and the improved pill furnaces also require more medicinal stones. In that battle earlier, the cannon beam fired from each cannon was 100 times stronger than in the past. The consumption was also 100 times greater than in the past. Therefore, the medicinal stones were quickly depleted, explained Yuan Chuyun. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor composed himself and said, "In that case, we can't leave the pursuing to the new army. Let the cavalry and flying units give chase. Your new army shall first rest and reorganize itself. When the medicinal stones are shipped over, I'll have another mission for you guys." Imperial Preceptor, our new army doesn't have a name yet. May Imperial Preceptor bestow us a name, Yuan Chuyun said. "I would be breaking the rules by bestowing a name. The Emperor has to be the one who does it." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor waved his hand to dismiss them while thinking to himself, "How are they all depleted just like that?" The things that Cult Master Qin improves seem to not take our hard-earned capital into consideration, accumulating energy at all costs. It's as if he's scared the firepower wouldn't be enough. Right at that moment, a messenger from a flying unit came over to report. With a whoosh, a 9-headed bird landed on the ground and tumbled forward, transforming into a divine arts practitioner. While kneeling on one knee, he said, "Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, General Bien requests for Divine Physician Qin to head to the front lines." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart stirred slightly. All the troops were currently resting and reorganizing. Only General Bien had led the army of Qingmen Pass to chase after the enemy. He was prepared to directly wreak havoc at Yellow Dragon Manor, the capital city of Barbarian D Empire. Bien Jinyun guarded Qingmen Pass all year round and was extremely familiar with the prairie. Once he brought the elites to head straight for Yellow Dragon Manor, he could be said to be moving at Godspeed, so conquering the capital wasn't impossible. Divine Physician Qin has already left for Dao sect and is no longer here. What happened? Shaman poison. The divine arts practitioner opened up his shirt and revealed his chest. Livor mortis could be seen on his body, and there were also extensive ulcerations. The divine arts practitioners hissed out, "Our brothers in the army have all suffered from shaman poison and countless of them have already died. The military doctor from Imperial College says that great shamans have poisoned the water." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked over with a grim face, then quickly stood up. "Bring me over to have a look." The divine arts practitioners cultivated corporeal body divine art and wanted to transform back into a 9-headed bird when Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor circulated his magic power to fix him in place, making his body float up in the air with him. He said solemnly, "Don't use your magic power. Otherwise, the shaman poison will spread even faster. You just need to point me in the right direction." His speed was extremely fast, and the space under his feet seemed to shrink rapidly. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor crossed 1,000 miles, catching up with Bian Jinyun's troops. Before Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor even descended from the sky, he was stunned. All around, there were corpses of humans and livestock throughout the whole of the prairie, and they weren't only of Eternal Peace Army led by Bian Jinyun. Most of the corpses were of shepherds and livestock that lived there for generations. The rate at which the corpses were decomposing was simply without equal. There were many flies in the skies, circling the countless corpses, but none of them dared to land. Any of the brave who landed died. The corners of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes twitched. Suddenly, the divine arts practitioner behind him grunted and puked out fresh blood as well as the intestines. He died an unnatural death, and his corpse fell off the sky. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's heart became heavier and heavier. Even if Qin Mu, this divine physician, was to come here, it would be useless. Roland's golden palace had poisoned the entire prairie, so the scale was simply too great. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor formed his hands into tight fists as he walked among the seas and mountains of corpses. There were numerous soldiers beside Bian Jinyun that were still alive, but their bodies were already rapidly decomposing. The corners of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes twitched as he looked at Bian Jinyun. This man's cultivation was dense, so the shaman poison couldn't get close to him. However, this old general had a blank gaze. He sat in a daze beside a young officer, which was his son, who had already died from the poison. "General Bian." Bian Jinyun lifted up his head in a daze, his eyes lifeless. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor turned back and left while saying with a solemn face, "You guys shall stay here, don't enter the pass." Bian Jinyun looked at his back that was walking away and suddenly shouted, "Imperial Preceptor, we still have many sons of Eternal Peace here. We can't let them all die here." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's body trembled, but he didn't stop. He continued to walk toward Helan Pass. In the pass, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked at the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire that were carrying green-colored bottle gourds. No one made a sound. "Let's begin." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor closed his eyes and waved his hands. "Flood the prairie and wash away the shaman poison." The bottle gourds opened up, and dark clouds rose into the air to cover the prairie. Bolts of lightning crackled as they struck down, and heavy rain descended from the sky. About 10 days later, the rain gradually stopped. By then, the prairie had already become a kingdom of water. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor entered it once again and saw countless people and livestock that had drowned. He found the army of Qingmen Pass, of whom only Bian Jinyun was rest. All the rest had died. "General Bian, let's return to the pass," Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor said gently. Bian Jinyun looked at him in a daze and croaked, "I brought them out, but I couldn't bring them back. I'm ashamed to face them. Imperial Preceptor, bring our corpses back to the Empire. I'm ashamed to face you guys." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor opened his mouth to speak, but Bian Jinyun drew his sword to sever his own head. With his 2 hands, he placed his head in front of him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor picked up this head filled with white hair, while Bian Jinyun's corpse collapsed to the ground. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 340. Tao Sect's Methods of Calculation. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor put away Bian Jinyun's head properly while looking at the corpses on the floor, his heart trembling. He saw that Bian Jinyun had placed the corpses of the soldiers of Qingmen Pass in an orderly manner during the 10 days of heavy rain. The old general had to have braved the storm to place the corpses of his soldiers together. There was even a wooden tablet beside each and every body. On the tablet were the names of the fallen. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked forward, the corpses of the soldiers of Qingmen Pass on both his sides. On every corpse, there was a wooden tablet, and each one had a name written on it. Bian Jinyun could recognize each and every soldier under him, able to name every single one of them. "You're a qualified general." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stopped, no longer going forward. He turned around, and his gown fluttered as countless of corpses flew up, following him back to eternal peace. Back in the country, the soldiers' families were still longing for their return. Some of the fallen were young sons, some old fathers, some were husbands who had come out for war, and there were also some who were daughters, wives, and mothers who had people waiting for them at home. He wanted to send them home. Roland's Golden Palace. Imperial Preceptor looked to the east before turning his head away and walking back to eternal peace. The night descended, and another world overlapped with this world. An ancient boat with ghostly lights sailed over, and elders appeared under numerous dots of light, folding paper men and paper boats. The souls on the battlefield quietly boarded the boats, without a single person making a sound. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor passed by their sides, not disturbing the envoys of Yudu. The heroes who had died in battle and the herdsmen of the prairie that had died to poison would be guided to the mysterious Yudu. No one knew who were the ones that were receiving them. In the meantime, Qin Mu scaled up Kunlun Jade Void Mountain. This place was known as Jade Void Paradise and didn't seem like the real world. Everywhere one looked there was a feeling of an immortal sacred ground. Even the huge snow disaster that had shrouded Eternal Peace Empire hadn't affected this place in the slightest. It was unlike Great Thunderclap Monastery's Mount Meru, which was located high at the top and had tens of thousands of monasteries. It resulted in a dazzling sight which people could see from far away. Their hearts would shake from the vastness of Buddhism. Jade Void Paradise was located between two mountains and hidden in the depths. If one wanted to go there, they would have to flip through thousands of mountains and rivers, and even then they might not be able to find this sacred ground. Tao Sect had people of cultivation who didn't like others to disturb their peace. These Taoists rarely left for the outside. The dragon Qilin came to the bottom of the mountain. There weren't any strange beasts guarding the gate of Jade Void Mountain, only a straw hut within which lived an old Taoist. When the group approached the place, he was cooking his meal. Qin Mu leaped down from the dragon Qilin and greeted that old Taoist. "Heavenly Saint Cult Master is here to meet Tao Master. May Senior Brother please notify him." The old Taoist was astonished and took a good look at him. He then took a glance at the herb basket on his back and the crippled man that was full of smiles. "So it's Heavenly Devil Cult Master. You have killed quite a lot of old Tao's senior brothers in that battle at the capital city." The old Taoist then sized Cripple up and revealed a suspicious look. Qin Mu smiled and said, "Taoists are most afraid of people disturbing their peace, yet they came to disturb the peace of other people. They deserved to be killed." The old Taoist shook his head and said, "For the people of the world, Taoists sometimes have to make a move. Heavenly Devil Cult Master, I won't argue with you. You guys shall go up the mountain yourselves. Don't disturb my cultivation." Cripple smiled. Tao Sect's people are lazy, so they don't restrict anyone from scaling their mountain. There aren't that many rules here. The old Taoist looked at Cripple again, and his expression suddenly changed drastically. "You guys can go up the mountain, but this old man can't go up. He must stay here." Qin Mu was puzzled. Angered, the old Taoist said, "I didn't recognize him at first. I only remembered after hearing his voice. Back when the thief god ran up Jade Void Mountain and wreaked havoc, he stole nearly everything we had. How many years ago was that? I've already washed my heart and renewed my face, turning over a new leaf," Cripple muttered. "Peh, peh, peh." That old Taoist ignored him and called over his dog. A huge yellow creature shakily lumbered over from the toilet while wagging its tail. The old Taoist then shouted, "A dog can't stop himself from eating shit." Cripple was angered. This old Taoist scolded me in a roundabout way. Even though he was furious, he was still full of smiles, making people feel as though they were bathing in the spring wind. Qin Mu's heart jumped a beat, and he secretly prayed for the old Taoist. He carried village chief while the dragon Qilin followed after them up the mountain. Cripple then suddenly flashed like a phantom, and his body vanished. He laughed. "If you don't let me up the mountain, try stopping me." The old Taoist hurriedly gave chase, and the two of them disappeared into Jade Void Mountain. After a moment, Qin Mu saw the old Taoist halfway up the mountain, stripped naked. He squatted on the cliff with no care. When he saw Qin Mu riding the dragon Qilin, the old Taoist immediately hugged his shoulders. Qin Mu pretended not to see anything and walked past him. The old Taoist let out a sigh of relief, and Qin Mu suddenly turned back to ask, "How can I meet Tao Master?" The old man was embarrassed and angered. "Tao Master Lin is at the Jade Void Monastery at the mountain peak." Qin Mu gave his thanks and took out a piece of clothing to throw at him. The old Taoist immediately caught it and wanted to give his thanks, but Qin Mu had already walked away. Once they came to the mountain peak, they could see waterfalls and springs. Many disciples of Tao sect were currently practicing their sword moves under one waterfall, beside which were the 14 writings of Tao sword. It was placed there for everyone to observe. The disciples of Tao sect practiced their swords in weird ways. They first calculated with all kinds of tools. Qin Mu could see that they actually forged the tools of calculation like Wuji diagram, Taiji diagram, 4 symbols diagram, 5 elements diagram, and 8 trigrams into treasures, forming the structure of three-dimensional space to continue performing calculations. These Taoists look like geomancers. Qin Mu thought to himself. When they came to a conclusion, the disciples of Tao sect would leap up, their flying swords swaying. Their sword skills were extraordinary. Qin Mu couldn't help watching for a moment before exclaiming in his heart, "Tao sect is truly a sacred ground. They are very serious in their learninga." A young Taoist nun was seeking to solve an equation without any result, making her so urgent she scratched her ears. Once she saw Qin Mu, she immediately came over to greet him. "This senior brother? Who are you looking for?" Qin Mu jumped down and said, "Is Tao Master Lin Xian around? My name is Qin Mu. I need to find him. Tao Master is at Jade Void Monastery. He just came back from Little Jade Capital 2 days ago," said the young Taoist nun while pointing at a Taoist monastery to the side. Qin Mu looked at her tools of calculation and stretched out a finger to pluck 2 times at her 8 trigrams plate with a smile. The 64 hexagram astronomical phenomenon can be solved like this. The young Taoist nun immediately looked at her 8 trigrams plate and was stunned for a moment before becoming delighted. When the group left, an old Taoist nun asked, "Who was that person?" "He said his name is Qin Mu and he has come to find Tao Master Lin." The young Taoist nun smiled. "He helped me solve this hard astronomical phenomenon question conveniently, so I could go through with solving the numbers of Milky Way's stars." The old Taoist nun was astonished. "Qin Mu? That's the heavenly devil cult master. This old devil killed God knows how many of our senior brothers, and he still dares to barge into our Tao sect." The young Taoist nun jumped in shock. "Heavenly devil cult master? Is he here to kill Tao Master? What should we do?" The old Taoist nun smiled. "Our Jade Void Monastery has all the experts of our Tao sect. If he tries anything, Heavenly Devil Cult will have to choose another cult master. Let us practice our sword. There's no need to bother with him." In Jade Void Monastery, Qin Mu saw a bunch of old Taoists and old Taoist nuns. Some of them were squatting in the garden and looking at a fresh flower with keen interest. Some were sprawled on the floor looking at a bunch of ants fighting, while some were drinking tea leisurely while playing chess. A number were playing flutes beside the pavilion, while others were walking around in ragged shoes. The tips were already tattered, revealing a few charming toes. Qin Mu retreated out of the place and raised his head to look at the horizontally inscribed board hanging on top of the Taoist monastery. He confirmed it was Jade Void Monastery before walking in again to ask an old Taoist, "Where is Tao Master Lin Xian?" "Tao Master." The old Taoist turned his head and shouted, "Someone is looking for you." Tao Master Lin Xian's voice came from the depths of Jade Void Monastery. "Got it. I'm coming out now. Please help me attend to them first. I'm at the crucial point of refining my pills." The old Taoist turned his head back and said, "Feel free." Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief. After waiting for a moment, he heard a loud explosion, and a mushroom cloud rose into the sky from where Tao Master Lin Xian's voice had come. A bunch of old Taoists and old Taoist nuns laughed. Tao Master exploded the furnace again. Tao Master Lin Xian came out with a sooty face and said, "Senior uncle, if you hadn't shouted, I still wouldn't have exploded the furnace." Cult Master Qin. Taoist Lin Xian saw Qin Mu and was astonished. He immediately wiped off the soot on his face and asked righteously, "How does Heavenly Devil Cult Master have the time to visit our Tao sect?" Heavenly Devil Cult Master? Once he said that, all the old Taoists and Taoist nuns turned to look at Qin Mu, and he felt murderous intents coming from their gazes. The grudges between Tao sect and Heavenly Devil Cult could be traced all the way back to some 10-20,000 years ago. The conflict between the two sects was carved into their bones, and to top it, Qin Mu had killed almost half of the experts from Tao sect in the capital to quell Ling Yuxiao's rebellion. It was no wonder then that the strong practitioners around would radiate with murderous intent upon hearing his title. Qin Mu's face didn't change, but a white head popped out from the herb basket on his back. Village chief looked around. Wherever his gaze went, the old Taoists and Taoist nuns averted their gazes. They didn't look into his eyes, but hurried off to do their own stuff. Village chief then slowly shrunk back into the basket. Qin Mu took out the golden book and smiled. "Old Tao Master allowed me to read the 14 writings of Tao Sword, and I'm grateful for that. Now that senior brother Lin has become Tao Master, I've come to let you read a book. I shall give you 3 days." Tao Master Lin Xian smiled. "You had also let me see great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures, so you don't owe my Tao sect anything. This book." Once his gaze landed on the first page of the golden book that Qin Mu had flipped open, he found it hard to avert his gaze. He couldn't help taking out numerous rulers and measure the picture repeatedly. As he measured, he also kept mumbling different rhymes for calculation. When the old Taoists and Taoist nuns heard his rhymes, they paid no attention to it at first. But as Tao Master Lin Xian's rhymes became more and more profound and his calculations became more and more complicated, they couldn't help becoming curious. An old Taoist walked over, and his gaze was immediately captured by the picture in the golden book. After a moment, more and more old Taoists and old Taoist nuns gathered around. All of them were measuring and calculating. As they got entranced by the calculation, time passed without notice by them. Suddenly, a hand stretched out to take the golden book away, and Qin Mu's voice awakened them from their trance. "Tao Master, fellow senior brothers, 3 days are up." "Has it been 3 days already?" Lin Xian and the rest were astonished. Qin Mu smiled. "Farewell." When he was done, he turned around, planning to leave. "Hold your step. Cult Master Qin, hold your step." Qin Mu turned around and revealed a smile.